In a small town, there lived a girl named Motosu Urano, who spent her days among endless volumes on history, philosophy, and art, enjoying a quiet life surrounded by her own knowledge. As her existence ended under the weight of the collapsing books, she thought for the last time that in another birth she would have dreamed of once again spending her life with texts that allowed her to understand the world. A moment after her death, she felt a searing pain and suffocating heat in her bed, begging for it to stop, in quanto someone's distant voice seemed to note how hard it was for her. Then, trying to raise her hand, she noticed tiny fingers and realized that her body had become childish, which created a wave of incomprehension and slight horror in her. After that, she woke up in an unfamiliar room, slowly coming to her senses and wondering where she was, feeling that something in her destiny had changed too abruptly. Meanwhile, sitting on the bed, she tried to comprehend what had happened and asked herself a mental question about her own death, and someone's soft voice nearby confirmed that her former life had indeed ended. Then her memory brought back an image of an earthquake with books falling off the shelves, as if prompting a ridiculous news story that might erroneously report a death under a bookcase, which left her bitterly irritated. After that, she mentally apologized to her mother, remembering the woman's joy when she found a job for her daughter, and now, sitting alone, she covered her face, unable to contain the internal pain. Meanwhile, she woke up in bed again and saw a green-haired figure at the door, not understanding who had come until a worried figure called out her name. Then the memories came rushing in, faces of strangers, individual men and women, fragments of events, and my heart began to beat faster in my chest, as if trying to keep track of the intersection of two lives. After that, she remembered her own mother, preparing bread with her usual ease, and she looked up at the tired face of the woman in the room, barely audibly saying the word mother in response to her own feelings. Meanwhile, Motosu Urano realized that she was no longer her former self, but had transformed into a girl named Mine, lying in a modest wooden bedroom, trying to accept her new existence. She then thought about how unfair it was to end up in a random place in little Mine's body, feeling annoyed that no one had explained to her the true reasons for what had happened. Afterwards, clutching the book, she admitted to herself that the desire to read remained the only anchor capable of helping her survive any environment, and she decided to endure everything if she could gain access to at least one text. Meanwhile, Turi, with a slight smile, inquired about Mine's well-being, and the lying girl wondered whether picture books were suitable for her at that age, after which Turi concluded that Mine was probably her younger sister. Then Maine, sitting on the bed, timidly asked Turi to bring a book, but she confusedly asked again about the unfamiliar word book, causing the other girl in the room to raise her head in surprise. After this, the girl with pigtails admitted that she heard unusual expressions, while the dark-haired Mine tried to speak more slowly and demanded at least some kind of book, emphasizing her growing irritation. Meanwhile, Mine angrily wished for the translation power to finally work, while one girl apologized for a headache, and a third noticed that the words around looked like Urano's language, awakening a strange feeling of unreality. Then the mother came into the room asking what was going on, and the girl explained that Maine was complaining of pain, after which the woman checked her forehead and noted that the fever had gone down, but recovery was still far from complete. After this, the mistress of the house told Maine to rest, as she needed to get ready for dinner, then called Turi to help, and the sister promised that they would return soon, leaving Maine in the silence of the room. She lay quietly on the bed as the footsteps retreated down the hallway, then stood up and wondered if the others had gone outside, deciding that remaining motionless was the last thing she wanted. Meanwhile, the girl with pigtails was thinking that her interlocutor might not have understood the word book, while the one sitting on the bed was worried that without at least one volume her condition would not improve, estimating that at least 10, or even 20, would be needed. After this, she was inspired to think that in these parts there might be texts that were not there in her past life, and, encouraged, she announced to herself that she was ready to begin the search. She then carefully moved higher up onto the bed, noting that the floor of the room was rough and dusty, and came to the conclusion that such an environment could well aggravate the previous weakness of her new body. Meanwhile, another girl was tidying up the clothes in a basket, then reached for the hanging things, wondering if they were objects or children's toys, and remarked that she would tidy up the bedroom if she were the owner of that room. After that, she thought how wonderful it would be if there was at least some kind of book bundle here, but quickly admitted that it was naive to count on such a thing, and decided to explore the next room. She considered the difficulty of the task, then jumped up to the high door handle, but to no avail, realizing she would have to find something to stand on. After several attempts to move the heavy blanket, she paused, pondering tactics, and with a touch of stubbornness decided that in the hunt for books, any means were acceptable. Then, in tears and with aching pain, she tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. She even fell back, acknowledged the resistance as worthy, and, gathering herself, finally opened the passage, barely avoiding the objects falling behind her. Meanwhile, she entered the kitchen, noted the rough stove, examined the baskets and shelves, trying to figure out their purpose, and came to the conclusion that books could not be found in such a place. After that, she leaned over the basket with unknown fruits, surprised by the unusual shades and shapes, and wondered whether it was a vegetable or a fruit in front of her, finally deciding that this place hardly belonged on Earth. She then thought over her plan for searching for literature and playfully imagined behind which door the coveted prey might be hidden, feeling the excitement of the upcoming little hunt. However, when she looked into the pantry, she found only layers of dust and regretted her choice, after which she decided that the right door was the second one, but it was difficult to reach even with a great desire. Meanwhile, she tried to move the heavy stool, surprised by its massiveness, and yet, with effort, she dragged it towards the high door. After several attempts to move the wooden box, she became out of breath and admitted that she did not have enough strength to pull it, so she decided to push, mentally complaining about the inconvenience of her weak childish body. Then she tried to open another door, suspecting that this was the one through which her mother and Turi had left, but, tugging at the handle, she discovered the lock and again stopped in indecision. Looking around the entire house, she noted the kitchen, the pantry, and the bedroom, and then felt a surge of disappointment that there was not even a hint of the item she needed anywhere. After this, she realized that there was no toilet, no washbasin, no shelves, no books in the house, and she gloomily wondered if some higher being held a grudge against her. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a woman worked intently at a printing press, while the narrative reminded us that before the advent of mass printing, books were incredibly expensive and belonged mainly to noble houses. After everything that had happened, she took a deep breath and decided to accept reality, convincing herself to start by at least looking for any written signs, because even if there were no books here, there should at least be a calendar or a news sheet. She rummaged through the kitchen shelves, turning over baskets and dishes, but could not find a single sign anywhere, and, unable to bear it, she broke down in despair, wondering why there was not a single written word in the entire house. Meanwhile, the other girl sank to the floor, looked up, and tried to understand what was happening, clutching the hem of her shirt so tightly, as if she were trying to cling to her own peace of mind. After this, she remembered how there had once been many volumes around her, and how even at the moment of death she had dreamed of a new life for the sake of reading, and now she only sadly realized that there was not a book or a piece of paper around. She then sat on the floor among the overturned utensils, wondering if she could survive in such an environment, until a woman entered the room, surprised that the child had gotten out of bed, and began scolding her for the mess. Meanwhile, the girl whispered to her mother that there were no books in the house, but all she heard in response was stern remarks about the chaos, while the boy stood silently nearby, watching the scene. After this, the child, sitting on the floor, pressed his hand to his chest, begging for a book, and the woman and the other girl tried to understand what exactly was bothering her and where it hurt. Then a desperate desire to plunge into reading overwhelmed her, but the thought that there was nothing to open and turn the pages of only made her tears grow stronger, while the two nearby watched with anxiety, not knowing how to help. Meanwhile, the worried woman was trying to figure out where she could get hold of any text at all, and the tearful girl was practically begging for any word, as if her breath depended on it. After a stormy outburst of emotions, she buried her forehead in her hands and sighed heavily, thinking that the past 3 days had been a living nightmare, and the muffled sounds of dishes could be heard from the next room. Then, realizing the absence not only of books but of any written traces in the house, she finally lost heart, burst into tears, felt the rising heat again and, lowering her head onto the table, admitted that such a life seemed unbearable to her. Meanwhile, the man suddenly grabbed a girl named Maine, which frightened her, and a woman nearby explained that their semblance of a toilet was a chamber pot in the bedroom, which they simply emptied out the window in the morning. Afterwards, he reflected on his own difficulties, realizing that his old notions of dignity would have to be abandoned for the sake of survival, and he remembered the small victories that had given him hope while his mother and Turi had cared for him in their own ways. Meanwhile, Maine tried to gather her hair, but the strands stubbornly slipped out, and the girl with pigtails noticed that her even strands kept falling apart, even when they were tied with a string. After many attempts, she thoughtfully decided to cut off some of her hair, but her neighbor was alarmed, assuring her that her hairstyle was as beautiful as the night sky, although Maine herself was adamant that it should be shortened anyway. Meanwhile, the woman with the long, dark locks asked if it was okay to break a small object, and the girl with the pigtail nearly screamed when she realized it was her favorite doll's leg, calling her interlocutor mean and clutching the toy to her chest. After this, the dark-haired girl quietly asked for forgiveness, and her sobbing friend wiped her eyes, then offered to cut a thin stick out of wood, since she needed such an item. Meanwhile, one girl was curling her hair while another carefully cut out a slat, and when she asked if the sticks fit the shape, mine nodded gratefully, accepting the homemade accessories. After this, Turi tried to style her hair, but, noticing the lack of a mirror, asked what she looked like, but the second girl noted in surprise that only adult women wore such hairstyles. Meanwhile, Maine was twisting the strands again, and her friend was watching the movement of her hands until Maine suggested a new option, lifting the hair up and showing a possible shape. After that, the girl with the pigtail cautiously agreed that the option was not bad, but noticed that the wooden stick seemed to be stuck in her hair, and Maine admitted that she used a hair clip and wondered how to tidy up her dull locks. She was considering making some kind of shampoo herself when a woman nearby inquired about her well-being, noting that her fever had almost subsided. After a gentle pat on the head, the child confirmed that she had regained her strength, and the adult then suggested they walk together to the city market. Meanwhile, the girl asked if this was the busiest time in the dyer's shop, and her mother explained that she had asked her colleagues to cover for her and had taken the day off. She then added that Turi had complained the little girl had been crying lately from loneliness. Afterwards, the child was informed that she couldn't join the others, as she had only just recovered from a fever. The woman sat down next to her, gently hugged her, and acknowledged how difficult it was to be sick alone, expressing sincere regret that this had happened. Then the adult suggested they browse the shops, and the girl readily agreed. The woman noticed the little girl suddenly perked up, and Maine herself was already mulling over a plan to scrounge up at least one book if she found the right store. Afterwards, the child enthusiastically reasoned that there were bound to be books outside, since there were none at home. The woman smiled warmly, assuring him that the walk promised to be pleasant and lively. Meanwhile, the girl was mentally calculating that her excessive cuteness would at least help her get a bound picture, while the little girl sitting next to her merely giggled quietly. At that moment, the child at the door announced to her mother that he was going outside. Then Turi set off resolutely to gather brushwood, berries and mushrooms for her diet, while the other girl reminded the boy to stay with the group and not rush ahead, as her task was considered an important duty. Meanwhile, in a world without schools, children helped their families as best they could, and the woman told Maine that, given the choice, she would happily become a librarian's apprentice or a bookstore assistant. After a brief pause, she suggested continuing their tour of the stores. She opened the door and immediately recoiled from the cold and unpleasant smell in the cramped space, covering her mouth with her hand. The woman behind her urged her inside, and the girl hesitantly called her name. Then the older girl said the younger one could sit on her back, as it was a long walk to the market, and asked her not to linger. The little girl reluctantly agreed and hugged her shoulders. Afterwards, the woman, carrying the child, noted to herself that such a distance was quite manageable for a walk. Then they entered the building, and outside, two women stood by the well. Then a narrow street with tall buildings opened up. Meanwhile, the adult carried the girl across a noisy street, where buildings stood close together, and the little ones, looking around the space, silently expressed their shock. Afterwards, Maine enthusiastically noted that these neighborhoods resembled the old European streets she had once seen in photographs while being carried along the cobblestone road. She then asked her mother which store they were heading to, and the woman explained that they were going to the market stalls, a place where those with extra money usually go, and where they themselves rarely go. Afterwards, the girl tried to figure out if the building ahead was a castle and asked about it. The woman thought out loud that the bookstore, if it existed, was most likely located among the squat one-story houses nearby. Meanwhile, the woman explained that the temple serves as a baptismal site for 7-year-olds, and beyond those walls lie the nobles' homes and the lord's castle. The girl, not particularly fond of imposed rituals, merely gazed thoughtfully at the wide gates. The map then showed a city surrounded by an outer wall for protection. The woman added that Gunther, a guard, and her husband, guarded the south gate, maintaining order along the approaches. Meanwhile, the girl reflected that although it was impossible to compare this city with Tokyo or Yokohama, the presence of a castle and fortifications made it a fully fledged center, but she was afraid that the family would begin to suspect something unnecessary if she asked too much. Afterwards, they walked down a busy street, filled with the noise of carts and crowds. The girl nervously wondered whether the city before her was large or small, demanding at least some kind of authoritative explanation, while the boy behind her tried to reassure her. Meanwhile, she wondered if the literacy rate here was extremely low, as there were no signs or symbols anywhere. Then she suggested that perhaps there was no alphabet at all in this world, while a woman nearby gleefully pointed out the market, noting that there, too, not a word was written on the walls. In a bustling shopping arcade, a girl excitedly asked her mother about wooden signs she had spotted near a mushroom stand, while the woman held the baby tightly in her arms amid the dense crowd. Then the child noticed the numbers next to the bread and, turning to the merchant, explained that these marks indicated the price and showed how many coins needed to be paid for the loaf. After this, the girl called her mother and inquired about the inscription on another sign. The woman explained the meaning of the indicated amounts, and the child thoughtfully suggested that one of the signs meant 30 ryans. Meanwhile, the two grown women embraced warmly, praising Maine for her ability to quickly remember names, while the girl herself wondered if she had been too hasty in showing herself to be too gifted. People passed by, relieved to see that at least there were numbers and symbols somewhere. They then discussed preparations for the winter months, noting that this is when most meat is available. Farmers sell off excess livestock that cannot be kept in the cold, so they purchase food in advance for salting and smoking. Then the girl asked if the market closed in winter, and the woman explained that vegetables were almost non-existent and that market hours were shorter. The child winced at the unpleasant smell, and the adult added that it was difficult to store food without some kind of refrigeration. Afterwards, the woman carried the girl past the hanging carcasses, and the little girl was suddenly overcome with fear. She screamed, forcing the adult to ask what had happened, while the child nervously tried to say hello with a trembling voice. Meanwhile, the butcher finished cutting up the chicken with a powerful blow, and the girl, watching this, felt a sense of depression come over her. What was happening was too abrupt and difficult to perceive. Afterwards, Maine slowly came to, hearing her mother's voice, and her friend worriedly asked if she was okay, as the little girl had been so shocked by what she had seen that she had lost consciousness. The girl admitted that she felt extremely unwell. The woman then offered to come back for meat if the child was stronger, but the girl panicked and refused, claiming she had been in shock and needed to recover. Her friend offered to wait while the adult finished shopping. After this, the girl politely asked permission to rest here for a while, assuring her that she would not cause any problems, but the woman looked surprised and doubtful, although the child insisted that she was not feeling well. Meanwhile, a man noticed how fragile the baby was and offered to take shelter inside his shop. The woman thanked him and said she would quickly finish her shopping, explaining that the girl wasn't feeling well. Afterwards, the child begged the woman to return to this very spot, promising to behave perfectly. The adult quietly exhaled and agreed, while the two nearby watched the scene with mild interest. Meanwhile, the girl wondered if this place was a small shop, and suddenly noticed a man inside. A little later, her gaze fell on a huge old book, and she wondered if it could really be a real tome. After this, the child excitedly called out to the man and asked about the object, and he calmly explained that it was indeed a book. The girl could barely contain her delight at her first find. Then she eagerly asked him if he knew a place where they sold books, but the man was surprised and said there were no such shops. The girl, however, happily realized that books existed here. She'd just never seen them before. After this, the girl wondered why there weren't any bookstores if books actually existed. The man explained that each volume was handcrafted, and therefore cost a fortune, and only aristocrats could afford such things. Meanwhile, Maine was saddened by the thought that fate had destined her for the fate of an ordinary city dweller instead of noble birth. She quietly lamented the nobles and the fact that she might have been reading by now if she had been born into their midst. After that, she clenched her fist, sank to the floor, and earnestly begged him to let her at least touch the book. The girl admitted she couldn't afford to buy it, but she needed to at least feel its surface. The man reacted with shock. Then a man sitting nearby listened as the woman desperately begged to be allowed to run her cheek over it and smell it, while another customer watched in confusion, not understanding what was going on. The man stared at the girl and categorically did not allow her to even touch the book, while she, confused, tried to understand why he was behaving so strictly. After this, another adult tried to leaf through the volume, holding it to himself, but the child pulled the book back with all his might, while the woman nearby calmly thanked the shop owner for caring for her daughter. Meanwhile, Maine, apologizing for the delay, sat down with a sickly expression, so her mother anxiously inquired about her condition and promised to put her to bed immediately upon her return. Then the girl admitted that she had found the book, but was unable to get close to it. Then she thanked the man for the opportunity to wait in his shop, and he nodded reservedly and gently took her hand, offering to go home, and she agreed without objection. On the way, Maine looked at the street and realized with disappointment that there was not a single bookstore nearby, which meant there was no hope of buying a book. Meanwhile, she decided that if she couldn't buy the things she needed, she would have to create them herself, and this thought gave her a persistent confidence. After this, the girl ran out of the building and, gathering her will, promised herself that she would not let this world break her and would definitely get hold of the book, no matter what the cost. Then she wondered out loud where she could get paper, repeating the question more quietly as sleep gradually closed her eyes, and the idea of creating a book herself, if there were no other options, was spinning in her thoughts. Meanwhile, she recalled the old man's words about the need to rewrite the text by hand, but immediately doubted that ordinary shops sold suitable paper. Her memory failed her, but soon she cheerfully announced her return. Afterwards, Turi came home with a basket of mushrooms and joyfully greeted Mai, who was lying in bed. The girl shared that her fever had passed and enthusiastically asked to see the gifts she had collected from the forest. Meanwhile, Turi held out an avocado-like fruit called a maril and allowed Mai to take a couple of them at once, causing Mai to thank her with genuine joy. After this, the girl wondered if she could make shampoo from maril oil, feeling the discomfort of her own hair and doubting whether the product would be of high quality, although she still hoped for a successful result. Then Mai slammed a heavy object down on the table, causing her friend to cough and burst into tears. She then looked away sheepishly and explained that she only wanted to get some oil, and her companion anxiously asked her what her intentions were. Meanwhile, another girl sternly scolded the boy for extracting the oil improperly, reminding him that they had already done it carefully, and that his mother would be displeased with the mess. The boy merely nodded guiltily. After this, the girl asked her mother if it was possible to teach Mary, then called out to Turi to find out the exact procedure for preparing the oil, and then sighed quietly, considering her next steps. Meanwhile, the woman warned that the problems would only increase if the girl wasn't properly trained, and the child eagerly agreed. Then another adult explained to the younger one that a metal plate should be laid down before work, as the wooden surface absorbs oil and juices. Afterwards, the girl described in detail how to properly extract the maril pulp and pit, and her friend admitted that she wanted to extract the oil from the pulp but was unsure about the results. She was then advised to wrap the fruit in a cloth to prevent splashes. Meanwhile, the girl asked if she was preparing the dough correctly, but the dough crumbled, and she was surprised to think that she was doing a better job than she expected, continuing to work the stick into the dough. After this, Mai tried to crush the fruit, but without success, and her partner explained that she had not reached the seed, called her incorrigible in such matters, and took the training for herself. Meanwhile, the girl with the braids suggested writing down the observations, and the black-haired girl enthusiastically praised Turi, carefully pouring the thick mixture into a bowl and thinking about the next steps. Reino recalled how her mother encouraged her to spend time with other children and find activities other than reading, so she reluctantly participated in school clubs. Then Turi reminded her to clean up her workspace after thanking her, leaving the girl wondering what else she'd need to make the oil. After that, she thought about the shampoo she had made with vegetable oil and wondered if she should add some herbs for a pleasant smell, since there was a little salt left in the mixture. Then the young housewife carefully poured some herbs into a bowl, asking to measure out just a little, but suddenly she doubted whether she had mixed up the plant, and her friend, in fear, shouted at her not to touch one of the green branches. Meanwhile, the girl with the braid insisted that they should at least try the plants, despite their pungent smell, but the second one refused, saying that she was not being capricious at all, since Turi herself had brought these plants, and the woman next to her noted her stubborn nature. Afterwards, one little girl added a pinch of salt to the hot water, wondering if it would dissolve completely, as otherwise she wouldn't be able to wash her hair. Meanwhile, another girl asked in surprise what was going on, and the girl explained that she was trying to wash her hair. Then Mai quietly combed her locks, and her friend, looking at her renewed curls, said with admiration that now her hair shines like a starry night, which is why Mai only muttered a short, perplexed ah. Then one of the girls sincerely commented on the shine of someone else's hair and said that it perfectly matched her moonlit eyes, and the second showed a bottle, explaining that she had made a simple 2-in-1 shampoo. Meanwhile, the wicker girl hesitated, but her friend gently assured her that she had brought the herbs and made a mistake, so there was nothing to worry about. After that, she suggested they both use the remedy so it wouldn't go to waste. Later, one remarked that her hair had truly become beautiful, another agreed, adding that the scent was pleasant, and the first ran her hand through her smooth locks in surprise. The third girl admitted she was glad to finally feel clean in her hair and suggested throwing out the unwanted residue. The next day, the girl with the braids suddenly remembered that her father had forgotten something, and, seeing a tied knot on the table, she screamed in surprise, glancing at the half-open door. Meanwhile, the little girl holding the baby was worried about whether it was even possible to leave Mare home alone, since their mother was at work, and the boy sitting next to her agreed that his father's morning antics would definitely cause displeasure. Afterwards, Mai was asked if she could walk to the gate on her own, and she anxiously agreed to try. The girl stepped outside, and her friend, watching her, soon noticed that she was becoming tired and tense. Then the older one explained that her mother carried her everywhere not out of whim, but because climbing the 5th floor was a real torment for her weak body. The boy next to her hesitantly asked if she was feeling okay. Afterwards, the girl encouraged the younger one, saying that as long as she walked slowly, everything would be fine, and the younger one agreed to let her know if things got tough. At that moment, someone's voice off-screen recognized Turi by name. Meanwhile, Ralph was asked what he was doing while he was walking with the two boys. The girl greeted him cheerfully and informed him that Lutz and Faye were also with him. Afterwards, she noticed her neighbors and thought they still remembered Mine's memories. Then the girl wondered how it was possible that the three boys had such different shades of hair: red, pink, and blonde. The story then moved on to three boys, the blonde-haired younger brother Ralph, the pink-haired mischief maker, and the red-haired boy Turi, who was the same age as him, all hanging out and chatting animatedly. Meanwhile, the boy noted that Lutz was the same age as him. They were both 5 years old. The girl tugged at Main's hand, urging her to hurry, while the other explained that they were carrying something their father had forgotten to the gate and could go together. Afterwards, the girl with the scythe rushed to check if Mine had hurt herself when she tripped and apologized to her. Mine quietly replied that she wasn't hurt, but felt very weak after that one fall. Then the boy extended his hand and carefully checked to see if Mike was okay, offering to pick her up if necessary. The girl volunteered to carry Mike herself and pointed out to Lutz that he couldn't carry both her and his bow at the same time. Then another little girl praised Lutz for his kindness and jokingly offered to carry him, as he looked pale. Meanwhile, Lutz asked Faye to take his bundle. Afterwards, Lutz, feeling the warmth of support, thanked Ralph for being the first to show him attention, to which Ralph chuckled thoughtfully and told him to hold on tight. Ralph then carried the girl on his back, insisting her weight didn't bother him, and the girl carrying the basket thanked him for his help. The girl over his shoulder playfully teased him, mentioning his marksmanship and high standards. Meanwhile, the boy told Turi that she smelled nice and asked if it was her hair. Turi blushed deeply, and the two watching girls whispered happily, as if they'd just seen a shonen hero. Afterwards, he turned to May and said that she smelled sweet too, asking how she managed to get her hair so smooth. May flushed, feeling a strange intimacy in his words. He then added that her face looked even better with her hair up and called her cute. May blushed again, taken aback by his casual tone, and wondered if he usually spoke like that to everyone. Soon the girl ran to the gate and called out to her father to return the forgotten bundle. He called her his savior, hugged her tightly, and thought how responsive she was, even though he was secretly worried about his wife's mood. Then Ralph thanked Lutz for carrying him, and Lutz thanked Faye in return, and the three of them set off along a country path, with a small house visible in the distance. Meanwhile, the man smiled warmly, remarking on how kind someone's daughters were to bring back something they'd forgotten. He helped the tired traveler sit down, and the girl joyfully declared that she felt like she'd come back to life. Then another man, beaming with pride, declared that his daughters were the smartest and most charming in the world. His colleague, chuckling, noted that the boss had once again started bragging about his girls. Afterwards, one of the little girls asked her father if anything unusual had happened. He assured her it was nothing serious, just that there was a visitor at the gate who needed special attention. He then explained that they needed to find either a suspicious person or some nobleman to report to the Lord. The girl asked if it was fair to judge by appearances alone, then reflected that communication among them was still poorly established. He explained to her that strangers could be dangerous and capable of kidnapping a child, so guests were kept in a separate room while the guards decided whether to let them in. The girl understood why there were so many waiting rooms at the gate. Meanwhile, Otto entered and addressed the guard, after which the latter stepped towards the sitting girl, and Otto lightly touched the chief to remind him of himself. The man then ordered Otto to report the information, accompanying his words with a stern gesture reminiscent of a military salute. The girl thought her father looked especially impressive when he became serious, and was struck by their local salute. Soon, one soldier informed another that Count Rainwald had ordered the gates opened. When asked about the seal, he confirmed that it had been checked, and the sentry ordered the messenger to pass. After this, the girl watched as the boy carefully unrolled the scroll and then opened the parchment, causing her eyes to involuntarily widen. Then they noticed that someone nearby could write, and one of the boys reacted with delight to the neat lines, as if it were something incredible. Meanwhile, Otto was completely focused on his work, and was described as the first truly civilized person in the world. May approached, but her father gently warned her not to disturb Otto while he was busy. After this, the girl, with genuine delight, showed the man a piece of parchment, explaining that it was made from goat or sheepskin. She then pointed to an inkwell and quill and began asking questions, and he patiently answered each one. The girl finally grasps how the word for paper is pronounced in this world and understands why Turi couldn't recognize it in Japanese. With this new understanding, she is inspired by the thought that she can now create a book herself. After this, the child, with an ardent expression, turns to her father pleadingly, adopting a characteristic pose, but he immediately responds with a categorical refusal, so quickly that she does not even have time to prepare herself for disappointment. Then she stubbornly declares that she still wants to learn to write and is not going to back down. The girl turns to a boy who can write, but he abruptly rejects her request, noting that she can't even write letters properly yet. Meanwhile, she promises the man that if she learns, he'll have to bring her the thing she needs, which only makes him groan wearily. Nearby, another guard cheerfully offers to teach her himself, teasing the guard about his sloppy handwriting, causing the girl to frown. Then she asks her father if he can write. He admits that he reads and writes out individual words, explaining that in his service, recognizing names in documents is enough, and she thoughtfully digests what she heard. Afterwards, the man recalls that Otto's handwriting leaves much to be desired and remarks that in Japan, he would have to relearn his letters. Another guard gently advises the girl not to look at her father so appraisingly, and she comments that soldiers maintain order, but it's the knights who write reports about the nobles. The boy then explains that minor incidents are recorded verbally, and the ability to write a name is considered sufficient. The girl again approaches her father with a request, calling him an outstanding man, which slightly embarrasses him. Meanwhile, she doubts whether they are really talking about a monthly payment for the work, but the man explains that no one would give that much for one sheet and they certainly don't pay such amounts to a child. Gradually, the girl realizes how precious parchment is and understands that such things cannot be given away without control. The narrative notes that paper is too expensive for ordinary people and is almost unavailable in the city. He then explains that ordinary people can't buy paper in stores and advises her to learn to write on a slate. He offers to give her the one he used before. After this, the girl beams with joy and asks Otto to teach her to read and write. He agrees and promises to bring her school supplies at the next opportunity. Then she enthusiastically says that she will rely on his lessons. The man chuckles nervously, and another observer nearby looks at them with noticeable tension. Meanwhile, the girl realizes that books and paper cannot be bought, and decides to start with something simpler, making paper herself, relying only on her ingenuity. Later, she lies with her face buried in the pillow, feeling like she's taking a step back, but then she gathers her courage and decides not to give in to the difficulties, even if the irritation still weighs on her. After that, she clenches her fists, convincing herself that her desire for books is stronger than any obstacle. The girl decides to start small and try everything that's available. Then she remembers how in a past life she made homemade paper from cardboard bags, and realizes that now she won't be able to fell trees by hand. She ponders the methods used before the invention of machines and tools. Meanwhile, she recalls ancient civilizations and clarifies that they are talking about the Egyptians, after which she confirms that they are indeed talking about papyrus, and someone nearby enthusiastically supports her guess. Later, the girl enthusiastically asks Turi to take her to the forest, but Turi, surprised, says it's impossible. The narrative explains that papyrus is made from plant fibers, and the need to go to the forest seems logical. The girl then asks why not, and the boy explains that the path to the gate is traversable, but reaching the forest is impossible. He adds that, once they reach the forest, they gather firewood and look for berries. After this, the girl notes that they must return before the gate closes, without rest, carrying heavy loads even when tired. She clarifies that climbing trees is strictly prohibited in size, realizing how limited their activities are. The girl with the braid insists that it's more than just a little difficult, while the long-haired one admits that she's not up to it yet, and the third one calmly notes that such a task is completely impossible for her. Afterwards, one of them explains that it's almost winter, so there's little to gather in the forest, and asks what exactly they need. The girl asks for grass with thick, straight stems and then warmly thanks her elder, calling her a true support. Then she notices her mother returning, and the woman asks Maine to get ready and not forget to take the stems, to which the girl replies that everything is under control, and carefully leaves. Meanwhile, the other one asks where the man at the door is heading and explains that she has to go to work today, so the younger one will be left with Gerda, since the fever has gone down and her condition has improved. The elderly woman agrees to look after the baby, and she approaches her cautiously, while the young man, standing aside, feels irritated and distrusted. The narrative clarifies that Gerda usually looks after children. Inside the house, the little ones are playing noisily while an old woman watches from the doorway. One girl admonishes a baby who's putting a dirty toy in his mouth, then scolds another for suddenly hitting him. The older one realizes that old Gerda's approach is hardly working. Later, Gerda herself tries to calm down a crying child who accidentally wet himself, and a neighboring girl notices this in surprise and tries to calm her down, saying that everything is fine. Then Maine feels the noise and crying overwhelming her, and she comes to the conclusion that this hardly resembles a normal departure. Inwardly, she hopes that someone will return for her soon. Meanwhile, Turi runs into the house, loudly calling for Mine. Mine looks up in shock, and someone whispers that Turi has come to pick her up. The girl rushes to her friend and hugs her tightly, feeling how tired she is of all the worries of this world. Then one of the elders gently strokes the girl's head, asking if she felt lonely after her family left. Maine quietly replies that everything is fine and promises to continue to try her best. Later, the group delivers the promised stems, and one boy asks if they're the right thickness and shape. Another notes with surprise that it's thanks to Ralph's efforts. Then they explain that Ralph's farm keeps chickens, which need a lot of feed for the winter, so in exchange for the grass they collected, they were given the necessary stalks, and Turi also contributed by helping them. The girl smiles, holding a bundle of sticks, and the boy thanks Ralph and Lutz for their help. After this, Maine decides to begin creating an imitation papyrus from the material he brought. But as soon as she tries to quietly leave with the basket, the woman stops her, reminding her that preparations for winter begin today and that Maine must help. The girl reluctantly considers the task of cleaning the fibers near the well. Then the woman says that the show is about to start and that she needs to get ready, after which she asks Maine to hurry and help Gunther, hinting at the importance of the upcoming affairs. The girl approaches her father, who is resting after work, and asks him about his duties, then discusses out loud what else needs to be prepared for the cold season. He explains that today they're inspecting the house and making minor repairs, and then they'll move on to cleaning. He also adds that during snowstorms, they'll have to lock the massive wooden doors and regularly check the old hinges. Afterwards, the girl inspects the structure herself, looking for hinges that could break. She finds a rusty hinge and a loose nail and reports it to her father, though he insists it's still holding up. Then she points to the warped door, saying it won't survive the winter, and asks him to replace the fasteners. The man irritably replies that she'd be better off helping her mother now. At the end, the man sits down and calmly explains that there's not enough money to fix every defect, and if she stays home, every minor problem will require additional funds. He suggests she move on to other duties, and the girl is shocked that repairs are so expensive. Mine stood with a cauldron in her hands, looking thoughtful, and her mother asked what had happened. The girl explained that her father had told her to help, so she would take care of the lamps, which caused the woman mild surprise. Afterwards, the mother mentioned that there was some wax accumulated in the house from this year, and it could be mixed with beef tallow or fruit oil to make fuel for lamps or candles. She suggested that her daughter use the tallow, as crushing fruit was still too difficult for her. Then Mine winced at the pungent smell coming from the stove, and the woman encouraged her, asking her to be patient. After checking the contents of the pot, she noted that everything had melted and asked to see the result. Meanwhile, the girl asked if her mother was going to complain about anything, but the woman calmly replied that she was simply picking up some extra trash. Main silently acknowledged that her mother wouldn't have understood such words anyway. The man then explained that salt water shouldn't be added or simmered, but should be filtered repeatedly. He explained that as the oil cools, it forms a thick layer on top, while the salty liquid settles at the bottom, allowing the water to be removed and leaving behind pure raw material. Mine wondered if she could help and decided to try the salt water option, but the woman warned that the method was troublesome, but it significantly reduced the smell and made the oil better. Later, someone asked Turi if she was finished with the fruit, and she confirmed that she had chopped it all up. Another commented that the oil was surprisingly pure, and Turi suggested using some of it for candles and promised to help with firewood. Then one of the adults told Maine to pick up a bundle of prepared twigs, and the girl asked what they were. They explained that the mixture would soon harden, so she needed to hurry. After this, one person began repeatedly dipping the threads into the hot mixture, explaining that this was how candles were formed, which then hardened. A child watching nearby watched the process with admiration. Meanwhile, a girl with her hair up was wondering if she could add some herbs for scent, making a natural deodorant. Another nudged Mine to action, urging her to stop just watching and join in on the cooking. Then one girl scolded another, telling her not to touch the decorated candles hanging on the crossbar, as the whole family needed them. The other girl responded by noting that there were very few left. Turi said firmly that they needed candles without a smell, and her friend agreed to limit herself to 5 pieces and declared that next year she would collect more aromatic herbs if the remedy really worked. After this, Mine happily announced that her candles were ready and already drying. The woman carrying the stack asked where she intended to put them, and they both began preparing to store their supplies. Then the girl became interested in what kind of room this was, and the woman explained that it was a room for winter preparations, while she was laying out firewood on the shelves. Later, they came across a storage room about half full of firewood. The girl considered cutting down the forest, and the man remarked that it was barely enough for one home fire, making her imagine how much the entire city needed. After this, the woman brought Maine out of her reverie, telling her to get ready for some heavy handicrafts. The girl said she was thinking about something important, and the woman suggested that the men would be busy with tools and bring materials for furniture. The woman then explained that the women's main occupation is clothing making, spinning, dyeing, weaving, and embroidery. The girl asked if they worked in the winter and was told that you couldn't get far in a snowstorm. After this, the woman mentioned that a special dress needed to be prepared for the 7-year rite by winter, and that the Turi ceremony would take place next summer. Maine listened to all this and quietly walked away. Then the girl stretched and breathed a sigh of relief, glad that she would finally be able to do her own crafts. Afterwards, Turi said she was making baskets to sell in the spring, and Maine shared her plan to make papyrus. Turi was surprised, asking what it was, and the girl, watching the basket weaving, thoughtfully formulated an answer. The two girls sat quietly at the kitchen table, and the younger one sheepishly admitted to herself that she barely remembered how exactly papyrus was created. Afterwards, she thought about how she had never touched it in her life. She remembered how the fibers were arranged vertically and horizontally, creating surfaces with different directions, because of which it was possible to write only on one side, and the sheet was almost not bent. Meanwhile, she searched her memory for a book that would explain how to glue fibers, feeling increasingly irritated as her friend watched her attempts. At the same time, she recalled ancient images and the delicate curls of plant threads. She then wondered whether the sticky hibiscus root used as glue in Japanese paper could produce a similar result, or whether it would be more appropriate to weave the fibers like fabric. After some thought, she confidently decided to go with weaving and noted that it was time to move on to preparing the necessary materials. The girl then asked Turi to bring water, and, having received his consent, they both sat down next to each other, thinking about how to peel the skin off the blades of grass in order to carefully extract the inner fiber. Later, she asked Turi where she could lay out her clothes to dry without the wind blowing them away, and her friend tried to gently hint at a concern she wanted to discuss. Then she stretched, feeling the weariness spreading across her shoulders, and looked at the folded fabrics, wondering if she could make at least a few sheets out of them. After much work, she looked with satisfaction at the finished papyrus, feeling proud of what she had accomplished and realizing that this was the first step to a larger winter project, creating her own paper. Meanwhile, the girl with the scythe asked if Mine had been acting strange lately, and the man with the mug in his hands looked in surprise at the woman with the bowl. The girl then remarked to her father that she was asking her to wipe her body every day, something that had never happened before, and the woman wondered why the changes had come so suddenly. After this, another adult said that Maine gets upset if she is asked to be patient when it is necessary to carry water, and the girl herself dragged the bucket from the well with the last of her strength, despite the obvious difficulties. Meanwhile, the woman was wondering if someone didn't understand how wasteful hot water was, and the man was eating thoughtfully while the other girl wondered if it really looked strange. She remembered how Mine had recently declared that a dirty room was terrible, and then grabbed a broom and started cleaning, although after a while she became exhausted and sank into a pile of trash in the kitchen. Afterwards, the girl asked if she had always liked things tidy, and the man asked what was wrong with a child starting to tidy up. The two girls discussed the convenience of being older, recalling an old conversation. Meanwhile, the girl with the hairpin quietly promised to surpass her friend one day, and the boy thought that before he had considered her an inevitable loser, but now he looked at everything differently. After that, they touched on strange dreams and incomprehensible expressions, and the man recalled how the girl used to say unusual words in early childhood, to which she mentally resented him, as if he had misinterpreted everything. The man then remarked that she was doing well in her role as the eldest and mentioned that Maine had recovered from her fever and was now full of energy, while the girl called him father and sat at the table next to him. Meanwhile, the woman tried to calm Turi down, saying that it was better for someone to be a little strange than alarming, and asked her to look after the girl with all her heart. After this, Turi reluctantly agreed, but suddenly screamed so loudly that she frightened the woman standing nearby, while the man and two children sat silently in the simple village room. The girl reflected on how unexpectedly everything had happened as she was being driven down the street in a cart, feeling the faint sway of the wheels. She then asked her mother where they were going and was told they were going to the nearest village to use the barn. The girl wondered if it was needed for smoking meat, as there were no suitable buildings in the city. Meanwhile, another girl explained that last time they bought meat at the market and processed it by boiling and salting, to which her friend was surprised to understand that today they would be processing pork. After that, she hesitantly asked again about the day of processing itself, and the woman calmly clarified that they were bringing a pig to the village to make meat and sausages, and warned her to be careful. The girl was surprised that such an event had its own special day, and remembered that she hadn't participated last year because her mother was ill. The woman, meanwhile, was worried about whether they would have enough supplies, despite their recent shopping spree. Later, the girl realized that, unlike in Japan, there were no supermarkets here, so everything had to be prepared in advance. A boy nearby was pouring water and remarking that food was still scarce. The girl asked Mine if the winter was so harsh that it was almost impossible to go out. Then her friend suggested that while working, she could sample fresh dishes and eat brand new sausages in the evening, calling the day a small neighborhood celebration. The girl began to think about this tradition. Meanwhile, she felt uneasy about Maine's vague memories and worried about meeting so many strangers. A man nearby expressed reluctance to go, prompting the woman to sternly clarify his words. After this, the girl noticed upon entering how the fresh air outside the wall differed from the city air, and she looked with delight at the open fields where the cart had brought them. But soon the boy warned her that he would bite her tongue if she didn't close her mouth, and this surprised her. Then the cart jolted, and she clutched the edge convulsively, barely managing to hold on. She explained to herself that the road, although smooth, was bumpy, and after rain it turned into sticky, viscous mud, making the path almost impassable, while the wheels rolled loudly along the path. The village was in turmoil. People were gathering outdoors when a man suddenly shouted at Eve and Turi to run. While they fled, the girl remained with the cart, feeling left out. Meanwhile, the dark-haired girl watched the lively scene of work and thought about the pink-haired fairy, wondering if Lutz and the others were nearby. Then the man with the spear suddenly lunged forward, announcing his entry, and skewered the resisting boar. A girl nearby, nervously biting her nails, asked him to wait, and screamed in fear. After the animal was stunned, people began to skin it and collect the blood in a bowl, and the girl, watching, felt uneasy. The whole procedure looked frighteningly careful. Later, she found it difficult to maintain consciousness. She slid down, and when she came to, she wondered if she had fainted again, and realized that she was no longer on the street. Then she tripped and hit the floor hard, wondering where she was and noting with annoyance that this day was clearly not going well. Meanwhile, the man greeted Otto, glanced at the man who entered, and thought that the room looked like a waiting room or a night guard at the gate. The young man acknowledged with relief that the girl remembered him, smiling softly, and she confidently tapped her chest, showing that she could not forget. After this, the man said that the boss brought her here. She was all flushed, and the other explained that she lost consciousness right in the cart, while he held her in his arms carefully and tenderly. The girl recalled the incident with a heavy feeling in her stomach, thinking that the nighttime visions were inevitable. She was told that someone would come for her immediately after finishing work, and at that moment, the man asked if she missed her parents, to which she quietly replied that disassembling and processing the pork would take a long time. Then he wondered how to occupy the hours of waiting, remembering someone who had once claimed he wasn't as childishly naive as she. The girl, however, decided that the current conditions were ideal for a respite. Meanwhile, a young man entered the room with a box in his hands, and the girl, noticing him, wondered if he could distract them with the thing he had brought. Afterwards, she happily thanked the young man for bringing her slate, as he'd guessed she'd be at the gate that day. The girl sincerely expressed her gratitude. The young man was scribbling something on the table, and she watched and couldn't help but smile. She mentally noted that he looked educated, attentive, and genuinely kind. Then she sat down at the table, feeling slightly tense, and carefully began to write on the slate, trying to form each symbol accurately. She picked up the letter tablet, quietly repeated the word letters, and felt joy fill her. The ability to read and write seemed like a real treasure to her. Maina continued enthusiastically writing symbols when a man entered the room, apologizing for the delay and mentioning her boss and her family. The girl became worried and wondered if her fever had risen again. Later, she was lying in bed with a fever, and the woman next to her remarked that her fever hadn't gone down yet, so she couldn't go outside. Maina quietly agreed, surprised that a cold could linger even near a warm fireplace. Meanwhile, Turi felt guilty, but the girl insisted she had to finish her winter preparations. Her friend asked her to stop talking like that, and then Maina thoughtfully noted the slight saltiness of the soup and the pleasant taste of the sausages. After that, she finished her food and felt pleasantly full, thinking that the ability to write letters brought her real happiness, and that she would love the book even more. Several months had passed since her transformation into Maine, and a full-fledged winter had arrived. The snow-covered rooftops and crackling fire in the hearth clearly showed it. Despite it being daytime, she noticed the blizzard creating a thick darkness all around. The younger girl asked if all the houses were this gloomy, and the older woman quietly answered. Maine mentioned that wealthy families kept many lamps, whereas they only had one. Her friend suggested using it, explaining that they tried to use oil as sparingly as possible. Meanwhile, Turi and the woman discussed the difficulties of winter, and the elder explained that after Turi's baptism, she would need to master a variety of household skills. She invited the girl to learn weaving, and she eagerly agreed to give it a try. After this, Maine decided to take her work further and create an imitation papyrus, confident that the material could truly replicate paper. By candlelight, she began working, unwilling to yield to the ancient Egyptians. At this time, someone was demonstrating the interweaving of fibers, carefully alternating vertical and horizontal stripes, explaining the technique itself. The girl then attempted to redraw a complex pattern and sadly admitted her mistake, deciding to do it all over again. The boy asked what she was doing, and she explained that she was creating imitation papyrus. The woman immediately assigned the boy to weave baskets, and he agreed. Meanwhile, Mimi tried to cook and admitted she'd ruined the dish again, and her friend noted that the portion wasn't increasing at all. The girl, with annoyance, acknowledged the obvious. In 2 days, Maina carefully sewed the patch onto the fabric, and while she was working by the fireplace, a girl approached her and asked what exactly was depicted on the sewn-on piece, noticing her stubbornness. The girl with long dark hair threw up her hands in despair, admitting her defeat, while her friend watched her in surprise, and a third quietly called out to her from behind. Then Mine felt discouraged by the thought that making the papyrus would take many days, and the woman next to her suggested that she abandon the idea and focus on the baskets, not believing that her attempts would be successful. After that, she reluctantly agreed to stop experimenting with the papyrus imitation, mentally acknowledging that some things simply couldn't be done alone, and a grumpy reminder sounded nearby to return to the baskets again. Turi asked for weaving materials and promised to teach her friend, but she insisted that she already had the skill, and soon began to concentrate on weaving the flexible stems. Meanwhile, the girl recalled how her former mother had helped her with needlework in her previous life, when she used newspaper inserts, and now she was surprised to realize that her long-standing experience had unexpectedly come in handy. A woman was working on a loom nearby, and another asked if the thread was made from Yuri's dress. She nodded, noting that the fiber was quite thin. After this, the woman explained that the Turi ceremony would take place in the summer, so the outfit would be prepared in advance in the winter, and she reassured the girl, assuring her that the fabric could be adjusted if it turned out to be too light. The girl wondered why she needed to learn sewing, and heard that she would soon have to learn weaving as well, since beauty and housekeeping are closely linked, and plans for the next year require skill and patience. The woman emphasized that creating clothes is important for both comfort and appearance, adding that cooking and handicrafts are the foundation of attractiveness. The girl, however, thought she couldn't achieve this and reiterated her preference for woven fabric over parchment. When Mine finished the basket, she felt a sense of relief, and those around her praised her manual dexterity and even offered to become the master's apprentice. She modestly doubted this, while her sister frowned, wondering why Mine could do everything so easily. The girl explained that she had learned from old Gerda while the other woman was lost in the forest, which is how she had gotten the hang of it. Her sister admitted that Mine could do many things that she herself couldn't yet. The girl then tried to calm her friend down, admitted that she almost envied her abilities, and promised to work all winter to get ahead of her, and her friend happily supported this desire. Afterwards, Maine felt empty. While her weaving was going well, it wasn't fulfilling. She decided to return to the topic of books and abandon thoughts of Egyptian papyri, becoming fascinated by the idea of Mesopotamian clay tablets. She enthusiastically set about creating the day's sign, intending to carve the symbols into a soft material and figuring that even a child could handle the kiln firing. Then the girl cheerfully informed her father that the snow had finally stopped falling, and the younger one, lying under the blanket, asked if spring had arrived. The older one quickly lifted her up, showing the rays of the sun at the threshold. After that, she opened the door, rejoicing in the good weather, while the boy inside, wrapped in several layers of clothing, shivered and declared that he intended to hibernate until it got warmer. The girl then urged her father to have breakfast, reminding him that he had the day off. He agreed, and she promised to pick plenty of steamed fruit before saying goodbye to the woman, who pondered the word. Morning light softly filled the room, and Mine almost dozed off again until she was called to the table. Soon, 2 men entered with the child, and the girl joyfully announced that they had procured 3 fruits for the meal. One of the girls asked whether the fruit they had brought was actually a pear and why it was completely white, then asked to pass on a twig, thanked them, and began cooking by the fire. At the end, one girl was carefully pouring juice from a large fruit into a bowl held by her friend, and her friend asked her to hold the container more levelly, to which the first girl immediately nodded. The couple carefully poured the fragrant juice into a bowl, and her friend admired its rich sweetness, adding that this amazing fruit is suitable not only for drinking, but also for extracting oil. Then the older woman explained to the little girl that the strained pulp is usually used as livestock feed, although harvesting the fruit itself is quite difficult. She added that competition for the harvest is fierce, as it can only be collected during snowy or clear mornings, so the villagers head into the forest before dawn. After this, the boy clarified that in order to pick the fruit, you need to warm the branch, making it softer, but an open flame should never be brought near the tree, since its strange power instantly extinguishes any fire. The girl explained that on cold days, people take off their gloves and warm their hands with the same mysterious energy, but the boy reminded her that the fruit itself can only be picked from morning until noon, which surprised her greatly. She then described how the tree would sparkle in the sun just before noon, shake its trunk sharply, and then its leaves would begin to ring and rustle as it stretched upward and waved its branches like long hair. The girl then added that unharvested fruits immediately fly away, and then the tree itself vanishes into thin air, a fact her friend found difficult to accept. Soon they began preparing the drink, carefully pouring the juice into cups and preparing to transfer it to a pitcher. She handed her friend the bowl, and she tried the drink, surprised by the thick, almost coconut-like texture of the fresh juice. Then the elder warned them not to drink it all at once, as such precious juice should be stored for the winter. The younger, overwhelmed with joy, asked for a little more, tasting the purest happiness. The girl asked her father if there was any pulp in the basket, and he confirmed it, telling her to take it to Lutz and exchange it for eggs. She sniffed the fragrant mass, wondering if it could be considered edible. After this, the little girl hesitantly held out something from the basket, but another girl quickly warned that it was bird food, which caused her fear and confusion. The girl then offered the boy some rice grains, and he agreed. However, another child tried to exchange them for eggs, but the older one refused, explaining that the food supply was already sufficient. Meanwhile, the children complained of hunger and asked for meat. Then the girl suggested trying something unusual and asked why he couldn't eat the food, which startled the boy, who loudly protested. She calmly remarked that it was perfectly edible. Lutz warned that if the grain was overcooked, it would become inedible, but the girl insisted it was better to feed the birds than to waste the food. The boy chided her for eating something so difficult to obtain. She admitted she was amazed by the taste of the food, insisting it was indeed edible. The boy reacted with disbelief, but the other soon handed her some juice, preparing to leave. He dipped a piece of food into the bowl and offered it to her to try, and she happily confirmed its sweetness and pleasant taste. Afterwards, the girl told Lutz to open his mouth, carefully fed him, and he admitted it was indeed delicious. The others immediately peppered her with questions about the treat, and she happily agreed, confirming it was delicious. Meanwhile, the boys were arguing fiercely over a piece of food, shouting over whose right it was. The girl watched their fight anxiously, thinking that brothers could be frighteningly stubborn at times. One of them insisted he could make an even better dish at home. She honestly admitted that without strength and endurance she wouldn't get far, so the three boys immediately volunteered to help and asked what to do next. The girl explained that she would now give instructions. Zasha and Zek were to heat the iron stove in the oven, Ralph was to bring a bowl, a wooden spatula and a ladle, and Lutz was to prepare 2 eggs, milk and a piece of butter. She then instructed Ralph to stir the ingredients until they formed a thick paste, and another child to pour in some para juice, adding that it wouldn't be fair if Lutz was the only one getting the treat. Ralph agreed and set to work. The girl volunteered to demonstrate the cooking process. She told the young man to grease the stove with oil, then poured the batter onto the hot surface and explained that the appearance of bubbles meant the moment of turning, after which she asked him to pass her the spatula. Then the boy noticed that it was dangerous for her to cook and took over the job. He confidently flipped the cake on the hot stove, causing her genuine surprise. Afterwards, she proudly displayed a stack of plain, hot paro paste flatbreads in front of the children, and he, frowning, asked what the word bean meant. The girl explained that they were ordinary sweet flatbreads made from the para fruit. The children joyfully surrounded the dish, admiring the taste and begging for more, and the girl happily handed a piece to Turi, who immediately bit off a large slice. The young man picked up one of the cakes and remarked on its delicious taste, and she praised his intelligence and added that the dish was simple, filling, and prepared quickly while he continued eating. Then Mai explained that she could cook other dishes from sailfish, but not the ones he was holding. She noticed his lack of physical stamina, and he offered to cook for himself if she taught him. The girl reacted with delighted surprise. Meanwhile, the town stood under snow, completely closed for the winter, and people only collected fruit on clear days. Inside the house, a man told a woman and a child that he intended to go into the forest to pick fruit with Turi that day. The woman wondered what to do with mine, then suggested sending her to wait at the gate with Gunther, despite his work, which made the girl jump up in surprise. She clarified that they would pick up the child on the way back and asked her to wait patiently until noon. The girl considered this a perfectly reasonable decision. Turi and her friend got ready to leave, promising to pick up Main later, and Main herself decided that today was the day to rest, to work on baskets or practice with slate at home. On the way, the girl asked her father if Otto was home, and he confirmed it, which brought her joyful delight. She had dreamed of taking the slate and going back to school. Then she thanked him for the food at the table. The man, looking thoughtfully at his daughter, asked if she was getting too carried away with Otto, and the girl was already humming and stretching as she walked, urging him to go quickly. She shamelessly confessed her love for him, which stunned the boy next to her. Then, perched on her father's shoulders, she said she felt elevated and declared that her reading tutor would definitely teach her new words today. The father asked her to hold on tight, and the girl agreed. As they walked along the snowy street, the woman remarked that the city looked like northern lands, and the girl reminded the man that Otto was already married. The man carrying the child on his shoulders greeted the guard, and the girl expressed surprise at the lack of bowing in the local customs, while the guard watched them in bewilderment. Later, a man entered the room, loudly announcing his arrival, and the man at the table raised his head and asked what had happened, calling the new arrival's chief and main. The chief asked Otto to look after the girl, explaining that she would remain there until Aoife returned with the steam harvest. He then told Mine to sit by the fireplace and avoid catching a cold. The boy, however, seemed embarrassed, mentioning that he had the financial report and budget in hand. The girl quietly apologized to Otto, getting ready to leave, and he, sitting at the table, did not hide his relief from the meeting and joy over the slate he had received, although he restrained his emotions. The young man was surprised by her apology, but she hesitated and admitted that their father had been offended when she praised him. This caused Otto to feel suppressed irritation. Afterwards, the girl suggested they practice writing and promised not to interfere. He hesitantly agreed and handed her the slate. The girl thanked him and sat down to work. They sat down at the table and concentrated on writing signs on the slate, and the girl felt a long-awaited relief, deciding that she had finally figured this matter out. Then she noticed Otto clap his hands as he explained that he was making a financial report and budget, mentioning that soldiers were bad with numbers, and the girl asked what that all meant. He admitted that, as the most capable in terms of money, he was forced to bear all the responsibility, and she noted that he was constantly being given the heavy and tedious work. Afterwards, she was surprised when the boy asked if the document was related to the equipment application, and then pointed out a calculation error, suggesting that the total should be 2,250. The girl added that her mother had once taught her numbers, but a woman nearby had been surprised by her ability to count, and the girl herself suddenly realized that she had made a mistake when she pointed to a line in the document. The young man examined the sheet of paper with the unfamiliar symbols and noticed that he could calculate them, but did not understand the signs themselves. The girl watched attentively while he thoughtfully sorted them out. Meanwhile, the girl became slightly wary when the young man hesitantly asked Maine to help him with the task, admitting that he had to put his pride aside for the sake of the request. She wondered if a child like herself should take on such a task, thinking that the assignment might be unsuitable for an outsider, and hesitated as she assessed his situation. However, the man was surprised by her doubts, and the girl agreed to help on the condition that he give her more pencils and teach her new letters. After this, she expressed a desire to learn writing and asked Otto to become her mentor, and he agreed without argument, noting that slate pencils were inexpensive. The girl explained that her mother used to buy her such boards, but stopped because she draws on them all day and quickly erases the surface, and the boy was surprised why this was a problem. He then laughed, calling the offer quite lucrative, and the girl declared she wasn't going to work for free. They eventually shook hands, sealing the deal. He asked her to check his calculations, explaining that he couldn't figure out where the errors were and had to spend a lot of time checking them. The girl concluded that he was correcting other people's documents. The boy then wondered what had prompted Otto to become a soldier, deciding to ask later, and Otto himself explained that he had been chosen precisely because of his ability to deal with numbers. The young man suggested that Maine use an abacus, but she admitted she didn't know how and preferred to solve it by hand, as it was faster. Then she focused on the problem. He noted how much easier his work had become and called Mine a real savior, and the girl was sincerely happy that she was able to help. After that, he suggested that the trade of a merchant would suit her, since she was good at counting, and offered to introduce her to the trading guild, and she smiled, promising to think about it. As they sat at the table, he offered to help her with her writing lessons so that in a year she could participate in drafting documents, and the girl happily imagined how she would write in ink. Meanwhile, at the entrance, a man greeted a woman with children, and then the action moved to another woman showing the girls a festive dress for the ceremony, arousing their enthusiastic curiosity. She admitted that the dress looked cute, but mentally noted that ruffles or simple trim would have made the outfit even more elegant, while the girl in the cloak questioned whether it was truly considered beautiful. The girl wondered if there was a rule prohibiting brightly colored hairstyles in church, and then asked her friend how she planned to style her hair for the baptism ceremony. Her friend admitted she wanted to leave it as is, without any embellishments. Then the first one enthusiastically declared that she would definitely give her friend a neat and cute look, although he hesitantly noted that, given his clothes, a simple flower would be enough. While examining her tools, the girl realized her mother's crochet hook was too thick for wool and she didn't have a special crochet hook for yarn crochet. So she decided to use the tatting technique she'd learned in her handicraft class to make a hair accessory. Afterwards, she approached her father and explained that the required tool needed to be thinner. Along the way, she asked if he'd ever made a Tori doll, noting his skill with his hands. Receiving confirmation, she called out to him again. The man asked if she wanted a toy, but the girl made it clear that she needed a thin crochet hook, much more delicate than usual, because she would be working with thread, not wool. Then she cheerfully suggested he try carving a tool from a wooden knife, praising his skill. Her father carefully began whittling down the blank, and she watched with concentration, pleased that his mood had noticeably improved. Then the girl called her mother over and asked for some thread in the right shade, explaining that she was going to make a lace braid for Turi's hair. At that moment, the narrator noted that the recent irritation in the house had gradually dissipated. After this, she confidently declared that making Turi even more attractive was only fair. The woman countered that the girl was already lovely, and wasting useful thread on an ornament for a single ritual was unnecessary, gently restraining the child from attempting to take the skein. However, the child insisted that she wanted to use the new hook and was only willing to work with the leftovers, and the two women watched her attempts with interest. Then the man offered to give the girl some of the remaining yarn, considering her rare interest in handicrafts worthy of encouragement. She silently accepted the decision, and the little boy, smiling, professed his love for both his parents. Looking back, the girl noted that she had been most successful with tatting even back in Urano's time, so now she confidently set to work, trying to create a lace decoration and carefully handling the tool. Later, she noticed a small flower and suggested her mother try knitting a better version, asking if she'd like to join in making the new decoration. The woman thought for a moment. Meanwhile, the mother skillfully knitted a miniature flower, and the girl, watching, admired her skill and decided that with such a technique she could certainly do a lot. The woman continued to work on the decoration, and the girl, fascinated by the dexterity of her fingers, asked how exactly such a detail was secured in the hairstyle while they sat together at the table. She then explained how to make a small bouquet by sewing loose threads into a circle and securing them to a pin. At that moment, a metal pin flew past, and the girl rushed to her father, noticing that there was nothing suitable at hand. She asked the man for a specific hairpin, and he agreed to carve it, impressing her even more than the hook he'd created earlier. The girl hugged him, calling him a true master, and he proudly accepted his victory in their little competition. After some time, the girl styled Turi's hair, weaving in jewelry and adding flowers, and the adults noted how harmoniously the shades were chosen and how neatly the hairstyle was done. She thanked everyone with a satisfied smile, clutching the new hook in her hands, and then noticed that the tool made by her father later somehow ended up in her mother's knitting box, and came to the conclusion that it was even more convenient this way. Soon Turi returned home, called for mine, and received a response in a subtle, friendly manner, and then the girl noted that her older sister had managed to collect some cranberries. Then they saw that the snow in the forest was gradually melting, and the girl thought with delight that spring was already near, which meant that very soon she would finally be able to start making clay tablets. One girl asks Turi to take her to the forest, but Turi calmly explains that Maine cannot walk such a distance, so it is impossible. A girl asks permission to go into the forest, claiming her stamina has increased, and another girl replies that she doesn't mind if her father allows it. Their father considers the request thoughtfully. She confidently states that she has only been in bed 5 times this winter, and he admits that is much less than before, adding that hot flashes are now less frequent. The girl assures that she will be able to walk and everything will be fine, reflecting on the fact that she has started eating normally, has grown a little, and has strengthened her body thanks to daily exercise. She asks if it's true that even 3-year-olds are taken into the forest, and the man explains that some are sent if they have too much energy and can't stay indoors. Another remarks that he'll rest at the gate if necessary. He sharply asks her not to make up stupid things and not to try to be a hero. She asks if this means she'll be deported too if she suddenly decides to go crazy. The girl asks her father if he's worried about her poor stamina and what she needs to do to get his permission to go into the forest. He looks at her intently. He says she should walk to the gate and back for a while first. If she can keep up with the others, then she'll get permission. She reluctantly agrees, knowing that he won't allow it any other way, and asks if going to the gate means simply going there and coming back while he takes a sip and she thinks about the clay tablets and how she wants to get into the forest. He replies no, and tells her to go to the gate, where Otto will teach her the letters. She asks, surprised, if that's really possible. They ask Main if his body is weak and explain that Otto suggested he learn his letters and work with his head. It would be easier and more profitable that way. Main wonders what kind of work they're talking about. They discuss the possibility of working as a scribe, preparing documents for officials from home. He then explains that Otto was once a traveling merchant and maintained ties to the merchant guild. The girl wonders if such work is akin to clerical work. The man gently strokes her head and remarks that the jobs her mother can offer are completely unsuitable for her. He reminds her to cherish her relationship with Otto. She thanks her father and promises to try harder, and the narrator notes that the same father who was jealous of her for Otto now looks simply wonderful. About she tries to lift the basket and admits that it is impossible for Main, and the man remarks that if Main cannot go into the forest, it will be much harder for Turi too. He points out that for now, Main is a burden to everyone, and when she agrees, he decides to accompany her until she learns to walk to the gate, intending to ask Lutz for help along the way. The girl listens silently. He asks Turi to help them when Main can reach the gate, and the girl only quietly lowers her gaze to the basket in her hands. The girl clasps her hands on the basket and looks down resolutely, while the boy next to her listens and the younger girl promises to do her part honestly. She reflects that although she can now reach the well without getting out of breath, others still don't believe she's capable of reaching the gate. The man responds with understanding. The woman asks Gunther not to overexert himself and to keep a close eye on Main, and he agrees, after which he tells Main that it is time for them to go. The boy watched intently as Main struggled to walk through the soft snow, stumbling and struggling to keep her balance. Though she insisted she was fine, her pale face told a different story. He grabbed her arm, helped her up, and prepared to carry her on, noticing that she was barely able to stand. Once in his arms, the girl was breathing heavily, feeling her strength rapidly draining away. Her thoughts were jumbled, and her body was limp with exhaustion. She clearly realized that the journey into the forest was beyond her strength, and her family had been right to warn her of her weakness when she felt almost dying. Later, the girl asked her father if Otto would be able to find time to learn to read and write. He noted that several new recruits had already completed their baptism and their unit had more assistants, meaning Otto's workload had become slightly lighter and the training remained manageable. Then the little girl asked if she could become an assistant, and the man holding the child explained that this wasn't preparatory soldier training, but rather the role of Otto's assistant. Another man confirmed that he was responsible for literacy training and that the girl would study with his group. Main admitted that she had already helped Otto with the financial report and budget calculations, albeit only with the calculations. He explained that the work had become too much for one person, and Otto was hoping for the girl's support, since she had demonstrated a knack for numbers. Thinking back, the girl realized she'd asked him to teach her the alphabet as payment for helping her with her calculations. Now she realized Otto had been serious and had been counting on her as a future assistant, even though he'd reminded her that children were forbidden from working full-time until baptism. Later, Main lay in bed, feeling weak, and the boy explained that she needed to rest now, and that her payment would be slate pencils. He added that Otto was certain that of all the possible assistants, she was the best at calculations. The girl wondered if this meant helping with the paperwork in exchange for further writing lessons. When she stated she planned to start soon, her friend asked if she'd had time to rest. After a brief confirmation, they entered the training hall, and the girl was surprised to see men seated, guessing they were the very soldiers her father had spoken of. The man confirmed her guess and introduced Mine to the assembled group as the shift supervisor's daughter, who was helping with the paperwork and wanted to learn writing. He then warned everyone about discipline and forbade distractions, after which the group agreed to begin the lesson. He showed them a wooden tablet with 35 basic letters and announced that today they would begin with the first 5, practicing their pronunciation and writing. Nearby, someone's hand was already writing symbols on the slate, demonstrating the example. One of the boys immediately attempted to copy the letters onto his slate, and several people watched him. Meanwhile, Mine quietly wrote the symbols on her own, and the armored youth watched her technique closely, marveling at her concentration. When the students noticed her rapid progress, one of them praised her, and Main admitted that she found mental work much easier than physical exercise. Nearby, 2 other boys unsuccessfully attempted to reproduce the symbols, demonstrating how difficult learning was for them. The girl suggested Otto finish his letter lessons early, explaining that those holding a pencil for the first time find it difficult to maintain concentration for long. She outlined a learning plan that included sketching the city, learning security regulations, short exercises, and simple calculations after reviewing the letters. She noticed that this type of activity rotation, reminiscent of a school schedule, helped her learn the material better. The boy, however, encountering difficulties even in simply reading signs, realized that some children find it unusual to sit still for long periods of time. He paused for a moment, then explained that when the group's attention wanes after half an hour, it's wise to change the subject to maintain their ability to perceive. He then suggested moving on to basic calculations. The teacher concluded the lesson by emphasizing the need to memorize letters and numbers, promising extra time for those who failed. The students agreed, although one man doubted whether everyone would be able to master the knowledge without a strict system of punishments. Main thought that if someone was already convinced of their own weakness, the training would indeed drag on, but they had enough material to move forward gradually. She added that it was wrong to compare others to her, and Otto acknowledged her point. The woman remarked that the students should be responsible for the letters they'd learned before going home. The man laughed, acknowledging her harshness, and she suggested they start with his own studies, to which he eagerly agreed. Later, the boy was surprised to learn that the other could write, and the girl explained that she was learning letters herself. They walked toward the castle courtyard with a group of children, sensing the solemnity of the moment. One boy admired Mine's ability to write her own name, and she replied that she was generally pleased with the result but intended to continue practicing. She thought that in this world, the ability to write one's own name was truly considered a sign of worthy accomplishment. Having caught her breath, the girl reflected on how valuable it was to have an assistant with the paperwork and how much easier it made Otto's life. Now she clearly understood why he had insisted on her participation. People rushed about their business nearby, and she watched with a new sense of responsibility. She quickly apologized to Lutz and asked him to keep an eye on Mary while she took the others where they needed to go. After confirming his agreement, she quickly took off and raced ahead, fully focused on the next task. Maine looked up when someone inquired about his well-being and heard a calm urge to move more slowly, taking his time. He quietly thanked them, feeling both tired and supported, keeping him on his feet. She admitted that endurance was much harder than learning letters, but she set herself the goal of covering the same distance tomorrow. The boy approved of her intention and promised to be there, adjusting his pace to her abilities. They returned together, carrying baskets, and another boy stood nearby, watching them. When the girl cheerfully announced that they had returned home, they were greeted by a smiling woman and a blonde young man, adding warmth to the atmosphere. She happily announced that she'd made it to the gate for the 5th day in a row, earning well-deserved praise. The others noted her growing endurance and assured her that she'd soon be able to reach the forest without any rest. The woman gently placed her palm on the girl's forehead, acknowledging that she had come down with a fever again despite her efforts. She praised her for her perseverance, recalling how yesterday the child had only cried over Turi's departure, but today she was still trying to move forward. The woman asked if insomnia was bothering her and offered to tell her a story. At first, she thought of a story about a celebrity's children, but, noticing the doubt in the girl's eyes, she suggested a different story to help her fall asleep. Toward the end of spring, as summer approached, the girl was finally allowed to go into the forest. She recalled that about 3 months had passed since she began her daily trips to the gate, and with these thoughts in her mind, she quietly drifted off to sleep. The man warned Mine that today she should only reach the forest and return, making rest there her primary goal. The girl confidently agreed, while nearby, a little girl with a backpack was already hurrying down the road. She encouraged Turi, reminding him that he should talk to Lutz so that Mary could get home before the gates closed. The boy's reply was brief, but his eyes showed concern for how everything would go. The group moved down a narrow street, and one of the girls cheerfully declared that they would finish faster than usual today. Then she confidently told the boy to leave the task to her, while the other noted that she seemed especially stern that day. Maine was preparing for her first foray into the forest. After briefly adjusting their pace, she and Lutz headed toward the castle gates. The girl reflected that she could now easily walk this path, since Lutz had already adjusted his pace to her weakness. Mary recalled the taste of a juicy parboiled steak, and the boy agreed, mentioning that Mr. Gunther had given him some money and also remarked on Mary's help around the house. She thanked Lutz for his constant care. The boy asked why he hadn't been taught how to cook this meat in the winter, and the girl explained that only fresh cuts were needed for grinding, and the heavy work of beating the meat with a knife made the process difficult. Behind them, the two were calmly busy with their preparations. After a long day of work, the group took a break. One of the boys said he would work hard for the meal Maine would prepare. He then suggested going for firewood, and the girl was told to rest. Sitting on a tree stump, she confidently declared that she wouldn't be able to get to the forest and back unless she stopped feeling sorry for herself. Her calm posture conveyed a sense of fortitude, as if she were testing her own limits. The girl grabbed the shovel, steeling herself, and lowered it into the earth, imagining the very depths yielding to her efforts. She tried to apply all her strength, convincing herself that the soil was bound to give way. However, after a few blows, she realized the ground wasn't soft at all, but compact and dry, reminiscent of a school playground. She sat down on the ground, contemplating how wrong her understanding of the forest floor beneath the trees had been. She was immersed in her work, working on something close to the ground, when she heard herself called. The boy's voice made her freeze, and she slowly raised her head, wondering what he might think, seeing her in such a strange position. He reminded her in a stern tone about her promise not to tire herself out in the forest, and the girl, trying to maintain at least some calm, forced an awkward smile, hoping to soften his displeasure. He wondered why she was sitting on the ground, insisting he'd told her to rest. She, as if caught red-handed, leaned on her hands and looked up, while he stood before her with unwavering determination. She, barely maintaining her confidence, declared that she was busy digging a hole, and the boy tried to understand her plan. Then she sheepishly admitted that she was looking for clay-like soil. She listed the necessary properties of the soil: dense, viscous, heavy with moisture. The boy pointed to an area with sparse trees and grass, noting that the required layer was more common there, and the girl happily grasped the meaning. Lutz again demanded that she rest and even pinched her cheek, checking if she was even listening. The girl cried out in pain, but continued to insist that they needed to get the material, and no one else would do it. She calmly told him to sit still, and he, catching his breath, agreed to help after he finished gathering firewood. A quiet but clear look of mutual understanding passed between them. The boy offered to dig the earth for her, reminding her of her weakness, and asked her to explain what she needed the material for. The girl hesitantly objected that he should focus on his own business. She asked why this was important to him at all, and he explained that, knowing her goal, he wouldn't waste his efforts. He then pointed out that she was digging in the wrong place, even though she could see where the right soil was. She was surprised by his persistence, remembering how he'd made her steamed pancakes when she was barely able to hold on from hunger. The boy reminded her that it was then that he'd decided to help her to the end. She asked if that was all there was to it, and agreed to tend to the firewood while he worked. The boy snorted, noting that tasty food worked wonders, and asked if she really expected him to dig clay just for that. He assessed the chosen location, and the girl admitted that, once in the forest, she couldn't resist the temptation to start working. The boy immediately pointed out that she hadn't intended to keep her promise, since she'd brought a shovel with her. Maine irritably admitted that he couldn't relax around Lutz, despite his quiet nature. Lutz assured him he didn't have to strain himself and asked why he managed to be more perceptive than his own father, complaining that Mr. Gunther was too lenient. The girl happily asked if what she had found matched his expectations, and the boy, sighing wearily, lifted his shoe, showing what exactly he had been looking for under the layer of earth. Lutz noted her tenacity and strength as he watched her work with clay. When he asked her what she planned to make, the girl animatedly described her plans to create clay tablets. She explained that she first formed a thin plate and then applied marks to the surface to record the necessary information. The boy examined the lines, trying to determine whether they were truly symbols. She shared the idea that writing allows one to remember things that might fade from memory over time, and then added that real books contain endless rows of such information and therefore amaze her imagination. The girl thanked Lutz for the clay and informed him that he could go if he had already collected everything he needed. Sitting down on the ground, she set to work, and soon delightedly noted that she had completed the tablet, mentally praising Mesopotamian culture. She realized that all that was left to do now was dry and burn the tablets, after which she watched as 3 boys cheerfully carried away the baskets, jumping over the stones in the road. She anxiously noted their direction and pointed to the signs, afraid the boys would step on them. The boys glanced back from afar, and the girl remembered wistfully that she had only just finished making the decorative plaques. She burst into tears, looking at the ruined preparations, and the boy, visibly embarrassed, admitted that he had not realized their value and had mistaken them for ordinary lumps of earth. She clenched her teeth and tears streamed down her face, reflecting the hurt she felt. In close-up, her wet eye conveyed the depth of the pain she had endured. Through her sobs, she explained the long and difficult journey she had made with her weak body to reach the forest and gain strength, and the three boys listened with anxious excitement. The girl joyfully called out to Maine, but she was sitting on the ground, covering her face with her hands and crying, while a boy nearby was telling her that he had only been able to finish the job thanks to Lutz and Turi. She cried, insisting that she didn't care if she was considered immature, while another girl noted with confusion that she looked frighteningly upset. The boy tried to understand what had happened and learned that Faye and the others had accidentally crushed the things Mine had made. She admitted that she had only recently been able to take a step forward, but her unbearable craving for books had proven stronger than she could handle. They consoled her, assuring her that no one meant her harm, but she refused to forgive. The boy gently argued that anger would not solve the problem, suggesting that they simply do everything over again, while the other two quickly apologized and offered their help. She sobbed quietly while another girl reminded her of her imminent return, asking for a little more time. The woman and the boy approached, calling her name anxiously. The boy was worried that further efforts would be in vain if they did not make it back in time, but the girl assured him that they would be helped again next time, so now they just needed to finish the job. He suggested putting everything in one place, assuring her it would be safer, then agreed to wrap up work for the day. She quietly approved, resigned to the day's outcome. Lutz thanked Turi, who noted that the girl would likely have a fever for 3 days after her return. They both acknowledged the gravity of the situation and pondered what to tell her father. Later, the action moved to the house, where the girl lay in bed with a high fever, barely moaning, and had indeed spent 3 days without strength, as Lutz and Turi had predicted. 3 days later, the man said that he would examine her condition the next day before going into the forest, but the girl quietly asked him to rest today, not wanting any extra trouble. He warned her that if she broke her promise again, forest trips would be banned. She readily promised to behave properly, dreaming of new clay tablets. The next day, a heavy downpour raged outside. The girl reacted with surprise to the storm, and the boy asked in bewilderment why she was opening the window in such a wind. She soon rushed off, realizing that her clay tablets had disappeared, but the alarmed woman intercepted her, exclaiming about a forest storm and holding her back from leaving. They tried to stop her, convincing her that going out in the storm was dangerous, she could get a fever again. But the girl, feeling unwell, was still only concerned about her signs. A week after making the signs, she was allowed to go into the forest, despite the continuing torrential rains. She was assured that everyone had promised to help, so the work would go faster this time. The boy defended himself, claiming he wasn't to blame for the damage this time, it was all the weather's fault. The girl, holding back tears, agreed that Lutz was right, and he encouraged her to try again. The narrative noted that the first failure was due to human actions, the second to the closing of the gates, and the third to the rain. Meanwhile, the children ran to the city gates, where people had already gathered. The girl was determined to complete the work with the tablets, despite the previous difficulties, and explained to the boy that they could be formed from kneaded clay, have signs applied to them, and be fired, although he listened to her with obvious misunderstanding. Maine sat beneath a tree next to the girl, calmly writing letters on a plaque, explaining that she wanted to live a life among books, not just capture her mother's legend. The girl listened attentively as Maine articulated her true aspirations. She insisted that she needed the books right now and admitted that she had to make them with her own hands, since paper and books were too expensive. The boy nodded, understanding her situation. She asked him what he wanted, and the boy admitted that he dreamed of traveling to other cities, wanting to see as much as possible with his own eyes, like traveling merchants and minstrels. He asked her if she really thought so and if she was planning to leave the city, and she thoughtfully noted that traveling was attractive in its own way, continuing to sit quietly next to him. She asked if he would be interested in visiting different places, and he agreed, recalling his long-held desire to see the libraries of many countries. Maine supported Lutz, advising him to go after his dreams. He admitted that he was worrying for nothing, as Maine always followed her desires, even though she herself understood that her previous dream was no longer achievable. She explained that she needed 10 tablets to record the story, and then sent the others off to gather supplies, thanking them for their help. The boys responded by cheerfully going off to their business. The girl asked if Lutz was coming, but he replied that Ralph was helping them out today, so he would stay with mine. She only made a thoughtful sound. She suggested practicing his name on clay tablets. Since they had enough material, Lutz asked what they were, and she calmly explained that she was talking about writing his name. Lutz looked at the board with the name written on it, not believing that it was really his sketch, and the girl showed him how to write it correctly, adding that knowing the letters would be useful if he decided to travel. He listened attentively. She proudly held up the finished tablet and considered it complete, reflecting that while such tablets could hardly be considered books, they were the first pages she had created in the new world, and the very possibility of reading them made everything more bearable. She thought about a world where books were expensive and the poor could not read, remembering that, being weak and sick, she had not been particularly afraid of death, although that would have sounded too harsh. She had previously had no attachment to a world without books, but now, with the tablet in her hands, she felt something valuable and believed that she had found the path by which she would live here. One girl asked Maine if she had finished her work, and Maine confirmed it, holding up the sign. Another immediately asked what it said as they stood in the forest near the baskets. The girl said that the story of the Star's Children was the first tale she heard from her mother, and her friend asked if it really was her first memory. Maine quietly agreed. She remembered that almost immediately after moving into a new body, she was lying in a fever, and then her mother told her this story to help her fall asleep. She reflected on how difficult it had been to accept her new life, and although her mother's care increased her loneliness, Maine decided to write down all of her mother's stories so that she would never lose them. The girl explained that bread crumbles over time if it's not baked hard, so hard flatbreads would allow her to reread her mother's stories whenever she wanted. The boy listened, and the girl smiled through her tears, feeling like she was smiling sincerely for the first time. She recounted how she tried to carry the clay tablets home, but they crumbled into dust and fragments, earning her a stern reprimand from her mother. Another girl reacted with surprise. She mopped the floor while the boy reminded her to clean it all up. Maine noted that the feeling of completion was still pleasant, even though her progress constantly felt like one step forward and two steps back. On a clear winter day, Turi greeted Ralph and Lutz as they were getting ready to collect firewood, and Ralph, noticing her first, responded to her morning greeting. The boy wondered if anyone in the group was missing, figuring it was easy to catch a cold in the woods in winter, while the man, carrying the girl on his shoulders, explained that her father had taken her to the gate and would pick her up later. The boy asked to convey to Maine a request to teach him another recipe from Steam, and the girl agreed. Then he noted that he himself had a lot to collect, and, waving his hand, ran on. One of the boys told Lutz to go higher and get ready, and when he agreed, they began changing positions on the snowy branch, each reminding the other to be careful. The boy explained that to collect the fruit, you need to warm the branch with your hands until it softens, since fire or knives are useless here, and the second, shivering from the cold, suggested waiting a little. Despite the frost and crunchy snow, he remained determined to work, remembering how the brothers divided the cues fairly, and he was also encouraged by the steamed pancakes that Maine had taught them. A comrade warned Lutz that the sun was already breaking through the clouds and ordered him to descend. Surprised, Lutz fell down, landed with a thud, and lost his hat. He stood silently in the snowy forest and watched the tall tree as the few leaves fell, and then the frame changed to the silhouette of the tree in the sun and a figure approaching the one sitting by its trunk. The comrade checked to see if Lutz was okay, and when he heard that he had barely managed to get another fruit, he praised him, then suggested that they go back and warm up by the fire for a bit, which Lutz approved. Several boys stood near a tall tree that still had a lot of fruit on it, and one of them shook the trunk vigorously, causing the fruit to fall down. He remembered the amazing tree that grows towards the sun and then disappears after scattering its harvest, and he hoped that Maine would one day see it too on a fine winter day. Meanwhile, Maine was regretting that she had not been able to fire her clay tablets, and a sigh of relief was heard in the next room. After a small explosion in the oven, it became clear that her mother had forbidden her from making signs, and the story continued about Turi turning 7 while they were stuck making books. The tradition of holding big celebrations and seasonal baptisms was recalled, while the girl helped Turi do her hair. The man felt irritated, since Turi's baptism was taking place today, and he didn't understand why the meeting had been scheduled on such a day. The girl, combing the woman's hair, remarked that he looked like a father torn between work and family. The girl asked about the children of nobles, and the man explained that instead of baptisms, nobles held gatherings where being late could result in one's head being cut off, which she found frightening. He then noted that the nobility had little understanding of the feelings of the common people. The girl emphasized that it was the father's responsibility to work and provide for the family, and the man suggested that she go with the others, explaining that the adults would remain in the temple square while the children went inside. He sighed with displeasure, admitted that he was aware of it, and assured everyone that they would certainly celebrate together that evening. Then he told Tori that he would accompany her part of the way and then hurry to the meeting. The girl told her father that she understood everything and was looking forward to his quick return, and her mother added that she would oversee his work. The man promised to do his best to ensure that she went through her baptism peacefully. When the hairstyle was finished, the girl with long hair told Tori that she looked charming, and Tori smiled gratefully. Tori was called an angel, and she confidently asked if the others were ready, after which their mother, described as a very beautiful woman, offered to do Main's hair too, and the whole family began to get ready. On a busy street, several women admired Tori, noting her neat outfit and hairstyle, comparing her updo to the whimsical image of a little princess, while the girl herself modestly claimed that there was nothing complicated about her hairstyle. Slightly embarrassed, the girl asked not to look at her lace-decorated headband, and a man standing nearby inquired with interest who had made such an unusual accessory, which he had never seen anywhere before. She explained that she and her mother had made the flowers together, and that her father had carved the base of the hairpin, adding that lace-making was a rare technique here, as her mother hadn't known about it. Meanwhile, the boy decided to leave the crowd, thinking that in such circumstances, he was unlikely to find love or start a family. Several children were happily making their way through a crowded alley, and one of the women suggested that they cross to the main road, where walking would be easier. A group of children, among whom was a girl and a boy in an apron, were moving together, and one of them suddenly noted that what was happening reminded her of a New Year's relay race, while the other looked around with curiosity. After reminding her that she should smile because she looked especially cute when she did, the man playfully pulled the girl's cheek and then noted that even without a smile, she was still charming, which made her smile warmly. As they approached the turn, the girl informed her father that they needed to split up, and soon the scene changed to that of a crowded central square, where a crowd of people had gathered around a large fountain. She tugged insistently at her father's hand, reminding him of his promise to take a certain route, warning that otherwise he would be late for the meeting. The man stopped in surprise, barely managing to say her name. Elsewhere, a man raced down the hallway while those around him chided him for being late and called him boss. Then another man holding a log called out loudly to Otto while a girl quietly studied at her desk. She explained that he was currently in a meeting, and the boy was immediately confused, not knowing what to do, while she wondered if he was able to read the symbols on the document he was holding in his hands. She offered to read the required text out loud, mentioning that she was Otto's assistant, and the man asked in surprise whether she really knew how to decipher such notes. The man admitted that he could only understand the numbers on trade lists, but was unsure of the product names themselves. While the girl noted that Otto easily taught her to read such documents, the man added that the ability to recognize letters of recommendation or noble records was extremely important. The soldier handed her a letter of recommendation from Baron Braun to Baron Gratz, and the girl explained that the document required the chief's main seal. The woman noted that the seal could only be placed after the meeting was over and asked to be escorted to the waiting room, while the man with the paper suggested that Baron Gratz would not find such an explanation intrusive. He acknowledged the need to follow procedure and realized that he might have to work there as an employee, thanking the girl for her help as she confidently continued her work. She sat quietly at the table as the narrative shifted to a view of the city's large gate complex, where plans were discussed to take up books and open a shop before starting an apprenticeship next year. The man invited the girl to return with him, as Tori was waiting, promising to listen to her on the way. The girl was surprised and tried to talk about the previous episode. She quickly told her father that she had something to tell Otto, but he insisted on leaving before Otto noticed them. At that moment, another man approached and called Otto's name. The man informed those around him about the merchant with a letter of recommendation from Baron Braun to Baron Gratz and ordered that he be placed in the waiting room for the lower nobility, while the other introduced the girl as his daughter and assistant, emphasizing her diligence. He mentioned that he had entrusted her with an important task and ordered her to immediately take the boss away, while the man with the child warned the father to watch his head, noticing how the nobles were looking unfriendly, and Otto was already hurrying them to leave. Tori receives new tools and work clothes from her parents to mark the start of her apprenticeship, and the adults wish her to use them wisely, to which she warmly thanks them, sensing the seriousness of the responsibilities ahead. Her apprenticeship with the seamstress is finalized and she will be attending every other day. A friend wishes her luck, and another playfully teases, claiming that she wants Ralph to call her a real lady one day, while Tori herself dreams of mastering sewing faster. One of the people present hands Maine a small package, explaining that it is meant for her, while another looks up in surprise, and a third calmly sips from a mug, watching the scene from the sidelines. The girl clarifies that the issue is not her own baptismal rite, but the need to use the item when collecting firewood, after which she suggests helping with housework in Turi's house. She glances at the knife, contemplating how convenient it would be to carve wooden planks, mentally praising the sophistication of the Huang's written culture, and tests the weight of a fresh log in her palm. Watching Turi work hard, she understands that she will have to back her up during her apprentice days, but inside she feels useless and at the same time admires her older sister. Trying to pull the bucket out of the well, she struggles with the handle and admits that she is afraid to light a fire in the stove because of the sparks. Then she reaches for a knife, but her mother stops her in time, explaining that this is enough for now. She breathes heavily, feeling useless, but then she gathers her courage and decides to start small, cutting wooden strips in the style of the ancient Huang culture, using what she can. Wielding a heavy knife, she cuts away with effort, wishing she had practiced in Urano's past life. However, she persistently produces a smooth edge, concentrating on her work. Lutz studies the slender twig, recognizing the difficulty of the task but believing it doable. He thinks respectfully of Juan's writing instruments and even considers asking for payment in ink when he notices the girl carrying firewood. The boy asks what she did instead of the clay tablets and is surprised to note that she has understandably replaced one project with another, and Maine is amazed at how he figured it out and notices that he seems clearly fascinated by the process. He clarifies what exactly she is doing, and she remembers how fascinated he was by the clay tablets, and now sees him almost ready to press a wooden piece to his cheek, feeling embarrassed by his uncontrollable enthusiasm. The girl explains that she is making wooden planks, since she cannot handle a large one, like a solid board, and Lutz immediately asks if she is going to write letters on them again. The guy offers to help in exchange for an introduction to Otto, and she is puzzled about the reason until he reminds her of the man she mentioned earlier and shows a keen interest. He admits that he wants to know more about the lives of traveling merchants and wonders if their craft is truly disdained, and Maine, realizing that the man in question is busy, promises to clarify everything at the gate, which Lutz accepts with gratitude. She asks Otto how to become a traveling merchant, and he is amazed, assuming that she intended it because of his stories, trying to understand her intentions. Otto asks to tell the boss to forget about this idea, and Maine awkwardly clarifies that it is not about her, but about her comrade, and his reaction becomes even more interested. She explains that she thought it was a shameful job based on his words, and he is confused as to what she means, while Maine admits that his parents would probably scold their friend for such an aspiration. She reflects on the nomadic lifestyle of merchants, which bears little resemblance to the quiet life in a single city, and doubts whether a child from an ordinary family could follow such a path. Nearby, a man listens to an old merchant talk about the harshness of wandering far from the familiar way of life. Otto asks why she doesn't tell her friend about it herself, and the girl explains that he will accept the truth more easily from him, especially after hearing about her connections with the merchant guild. The girl worries about running up a debt to Otto if she can't pay it off, and the boy jokingly suggests she's helping Lutz out of affection. She explains that she's doing it because Lutz always helps her, and ultimately thanks Otto, who generously promises to take care of it on his next day off. Having mustered up her politeness, she inquires about the possibility of receiving some ink instead of the pencil leads and offers to pay for it herself, understanding the value of such a rare material. He explains that a real apprentice's work requires 3 years of unpaid labor, and that ink is expensive and not suitable for children's experiments. The girl is shocked to realize that such a subject is completely out of her reach. Irritated, she scolds him for carelessly spilling ink just when she had almost solved the problem with the writing material, while he silently watches her outburst. Sitting with him on the street, she asks about the properties of real ink and mentally goes over the ways to obtain it: buy, find, receive as a gift, steal, or make, gradually coming to the conclusion that the only real option remains self-production. They discuss the idea of using black liquid to write on the tablets, suggesting that they could try ash or soot, and the girl excitedly agrees to test the idea. 3 days later, a large pile of soot lies on the cloth, and the boy notes that they've collected significantly more than they expected. The girl, with a slight chuckle, admits she was expecting ash, but the woman with the laundry corrects her, explaining that it's actually soot. At home in late winter, a girl explains that ash is used for a variety of household tasks, from making soap to melting snow. Another child asks if she can melt the snow right now, then expresses surprise that the first one also has to clean the stove, while a rag doll receives thanks for her help. She remembers dressing up as Cinderella and working hard, only to fall ill, and now she's pondering how to turn soot into writing medium, wondering if she should add water first. Kneeling by the stream, the girl watches the current, then stirs the dark liquid in a bowl and suggests testing it first on writing, noting that the mixture separates from the water and behaves unpredictably. The boy explains that the oil is used in food and shampoo, but he can't bring it because his mother forbids him from wasting it. The girl tries to dissolve the soot in the oil, but the tiny particles smear, and she disappointingly admits her failure. She tries to think of an alternative, and the boy remembers that Japanese paints were made with a glue base from pig skin and bones, but now he can't do that kind of cooking without fire. The girl suggests mixing clay with graphite powder, explaining that pencil lead is made of graphite and clay. The boy listens attentively, and she recalls how she used to dig up clay for tablets, hoping the idea would work despite the use of soot. He kneels at the edge of the forest, suggesting that they not dig again, as there must be unused clay somewhere nearby, and his hands begin to knead the dark, soft material, forming a blank. Noticing that his palms have turned black, the boy suggests washing them in the river before returning home, and then happily announces that Otto has agreed to meet them on his day off, which delights the girl. They sit next to each other on the grass, and the boy thanks her, to which the girl replies that it's nothing, and then both hope that the meeting will really help Lutz figure out his future. She asks how long the wooden sticks need to dry, and he admits no one knows for sure. The girl suggests trying to fire them, but the boy reminds her of previous explosions, while she evaluates the blanks and considers them quite successful. Returning with a basket, she cheerfully announces her arrival, and the boy greets her. The girl suggests drying the ingredients in the pantry, happy that the work is progressing. After some time, she panics and announces that the blanks have disappeared and demands an explanation, and the boy, not understanding anything, asks what happened to her. She turns to her mother, asking about the wooden planks that used to be there, and the woman calmly replies that she used them as kindling, recalling their uneven thickness and neatly cut surfaces. The girl is shocked and asks if the sticks she prepared were actually used for kindling, and the woman explains that the firewood was collected in the forest only after the girl finally learned to help, and is surprised why it was put aside in the first place. She excitedly tells him that she has collected all the stories she heard before bed into a single collection and can retell them again, while the other girl, sitting on the floor, sharply waves her hand, as if denying the hint, and the scene ends with a sudden, sharp movement. She notices her hand shaking, trying to figure out why, but then her body suddenly gives in and she falls backwards, causing the frightened girl next to her to turn to her with an alarmed cry. She feels an all-consuming heat and painful pressure inside, as if a fever is slowly burning her from the inside and depriving her of the strength to resist. She wonders if the real mind has been consumed by the disease itself, while the three children watch silently, one of them doubtfully suggesting that it might be Lutz. Lutz comes to, looks around in confusion, and doesn't understand how he ended up there. Seeing Maine in bed, he calls out to her in alarm, and soon the woman runs into the room, relieved to see the girl awake and checking on her. A girl lying in bed reports a sore throat and clammy body, and the woman caring for her says she was worried because she had been unconscious for several days after falling in the pantry. The boy tells her that their attempt failed again, their mother burned the wooden planks they wanted to save. He admits he can't take it anymore, after all they've tried so many times to put them somewhere safe. He holds her hand gently as she tears up and reflects on how her books seem to never be finished, as if it were destined to be so and she is doomed to suffer constant failure. He asks her not to blame herself and suggests they look for a material that simply can't be burned. She silently worries, while he, pondering the possibilities out loud, tries to understand what could be created from a fireproof material, and she reacts with genuine surprise. She thanks Lutz for his concern, after which the boy decides to collect bamboo, which he believes will aid her recovery. Sturdy bamboo stalks appear on the screen, and the girl mentally admires the success of his idea. He insists that she get well soon, otherwise he won't be able to introduce her to Otto. The girl quietly expresses her gratitude, but then a loud crackling sound suddenly erupts in the fireplace, and the woman runs into the room, excitedly demanding to know what Lutz brought home yesterday. She tries to understand why he didn't collect regular firewood, and recalls how they all assumed what he brought was a type of bunkhitz tree. The girl on the bed explains that the peeled bamboo did indeed look very similar. Another girl warns that bringing bamboo into the house is dangerous, and the sick girl weakly agrees, covering herself with a blanket and feeling another heavy failure that seems to nullify her efforts. She reflects on how much she longs to be a healthy adult with a resilient body. If she were older, she could make Japanese paper and avoid so many mistakes. Then she wonders whether her body will ever grow or dissolve into illness. Maine, clutching the warm glowing light to her chest, exhales slowly, and Lutz reminds her that she has to do this for the sake of meeting Otto. He insists that she must recover at any cost and must make sure she understands this. The girl looks at him wide-eyed, amazed by his determination. She lies down again, determined to regain her strength and fulfill her promise to introduce Lutz to Otto. Remembering the bamboo strips she brought, she resolves to recover so she can keep her word. The girl suddenly wakes up, panicked that now is not the time to die. She remembers how she couldn't put a single dark page of Urano's past to rest, and feels she can no longer afford weakness. She notices her own hand and wonders with surprise if her body is truly beginning to obey her. Sitting up, she quietly becomes aware of a strange sense of control, sitting wrapped in a warm blanket. She wonders if the warmth inside her has truly diminished, remembering that this attack had been strange. A fever seemed to suddenly spread through her body, and then just as suddenly subside, something she had never felt before. That night, she lies in bed, thinking about her illness and admitting she has nowhere to look up information about it because she doesn't have a book. She decides to simply continue observing herself, relieved that her fever has subsided. At the castle walls, she apologizes to Otto for not being able to come to the meeting with Lutz, and once inside, he asks if she is okay after a 5-day fever, and she thanks him for his concern. The girl, somewhat hesitantly, says she's faced with a problem she can't solve on her own, then explains that she needs to do something now, but she's unable to create it herself. She hopes to learn when she's older, but can't wait that long and asks Otto what he would do in her place. He points out that if she can't do the task herself, it's logical to hire someone who can, and asks if that's what she's worried about, and she reacts with mild confusion and surprise. She wonders if she can hire someone herself, but the thought of a complete lack of funds stops her, so he suggests looking for a person capable of this and convincing him to help voluntarily. He grins confidently, adding that if he's lucky, he won't have to pay anything at all. The girl clenches her fist, promising to remember his words, sensing the true merchant logic in his reasoning. They agree to meet the day after tomorrow in the central square at the third stroke of the bell, and the girl confirms the time, making a mental note of the meeting place while the man makes notes on a board. He says he's looking forward to a fun weekend, which puts her in an awkward position. She feels like he's hinting that she shouldn't introduce him to anyone dubious. A nearby child suggests that Otto himself must be an interesting person. She confidently tells Lutz that they need to thoroughly clean him from head to toe, and he is stunned, trying to make sense of it, while the narrative wonders whether the encounter about the trade of traveling merchants is truly a coincidence or something more serious. The boy realizes that tomorrow will be like a real job interview, and the girl says she's questioned her father in advance and is confident of success. She emphasizes the importance of tomorrow's conversation for his future apprenticeship. She reminds him how important first impressions are and asks him to tidy himself up so he won't be rejected out of hand, while he doubts that clean clothes will make a difference. She asks Lutz if he really wants to become a traveling merchant and what he plans to do next, then reminds him that Otto knows nothing about him, and the boy wonders why she started talking about it so suddenly. The narrative notes that children usually become apprentices through family connections, and Lutz, who wants to become a merchant without following his relative's trade, finds himself in a rare position. The girl advises him to formulate his reasons, demonstrate his desire and seriousness to gain trust, and he listens thoughtfully. She says that she wants to sell paper and teach its production in the future when she becomes a merchant's apprentice, and the boy asks if Mine could explain right away why she wants to go into trading. She replies that no one else would want the paper itself, and he admits that selling books will probably be difficult, but she believes that paper is more profitable than parchment and will be in demand. Mine rests against a tree while another girl says that she needs a merchant who will understand the benefits of papermaking and take her on as an apprentice, and Mine silently replies that she will think about it again. A girl tells a boy that being late would be fatal, and he explains that his mother was picking at his hair and scolding him. Someone nearby remarks that it looks like they're too early, as only the third bell has rung. The girl advises the other to ask questions directly, which surprises her. The boy then apologizes for having to use an expensive item, but she reassures him that he always takes care of her, and he offers to teach her how to make one. She reminds the boy that the first step should be a greeting, and he nervously agrees. At that moment, they both notice something unexpected and stop, staring at the new development. The boy and girl stand in front of the two men, and one of them notes with bewilderment that there was no mention of the second interviewee, since Otto had never mentioned him before. The young man greets the girl by name and clarifies that the second one is Lutz, while the girl thanks Otto for his time and introduces Lutz as her friend. Lutz introduces himself sheepishly, and the girl smiles at him supportively, while the man explains that the girl's name is Mine, and that she is the leader's daughter and also his assistant. The man introduces them to Benno, an acquaintance from their trading days, and he greets Mine, who smiles politely and reminds herself not to bow. He explains that the little girl, who is 6 years old, looks much more mature due to proper upbringing, and that he is teaching her to read and write so that he can make her his assistant. Another man is surprised that she hasn't yet been baptized. He notices something in his interlocutor's hair and asks what it is, and the girl says she's confused and wants to clarify one thing first. The man smirks, implying that she speaks as if she's already become his assistant. She hesitantly admits that after her failures she feels awkward asking stupid questions, so the man explains that the object is a hairpin, and later realizes that she is trying to knock him down on purpose. Another man explains that this stick holds her hair in place, and the girl confirms that it is simply a piece of wood that she whittled down while simultaneously gathering her hair into a bun. The blonde man covers his mouth with his hand in amazement, then admires her hairstyle and asks what she put in her hair to give it such shine. The girl explains that the hairstyle is made up of ordinary items but includes hidden details, while the man suggests that the boy uses the same thing, remembering how Mine applied the product to his hair yesterday. He reacts tensely after she says he underestimated them, thinking the children would immediately reveal the secret. She smiles calmly and says she has no intention of sharing such valuable information. The narrative notes that citizenship grants the right to live in the city and confirms identity, while visitors pay a large sum to obtain it, and the registration of city residents occurs in the church during baptism at the age of 7. The young man explains that in the city he only draws water from a well, and the man explains that life on the road and life in the city are completely different. Travelers do not have fixed wells, and water has to be found along the way. The boy suggests following the river, but the girl points out that he won't follow it forever, and the older boy doubts he even knows where the river is. The narrative reminds us that detailed maps are rare due to the high cost of paper and ink. He explains that the most important thing for traveling merchants is their final destination, so children usually inherit their parents' trade routes, carefully hiding them from outsiders as a valuable tool. The older man says that travelers ultimately seek citizenship so they can leave the hardships of travel behind and trade safely in the city. The boy is surprised, and the narrator clarifies that this is the dream of a traveling merchant. The boy abruptly shuts Otto's mouth to prevent him from continuing, and says himself that Otto became a soldier for Karina's sake. He tries to object, while the girl, nearby, listens silently. A man remembers becoming an adult for the first time at 15, smiling, while nearby a woman refuses to share details with a curious girl in a room filled with books, and the watching girl quietly muses. He enthusiastically recounts how Otto fell in love with Karina at first sight, spent his entire fortune on citizenship, and became a soldier to prove the seriousness of his intentions, while the others listen in silence. Otto recalls how the leader helped him during those years, laughing about it, but a man next to him coughs, interrupting him and declaring that Otto should give up the idea of becoming a traveling merchant, which clearly surprises him. A young man suggests that Lutz consider not the path of a traveling merchant, but an apprenticeship with a city merchant in order to one day buy himself the right to free passage out of the city, and Lutz reacts with genuine distrust. The girl explains that she wanted him to hear the truth about traveling traders from someone who grew up in the same conditions, and admits that only now does she understand that he shouldn't renounce his citizenship for the sake of such a dream. Lutz takes her words seriously. The young man asks if Lutz really wants to become a merchant, and after the elder's explanation, he understands why he was brought to him, while the girl silently watches from the side. The man asks what Lutz will be able to sell as a merchant, warning that the conversation will end if he doesn't answer. The boy hesitates, and the girl watches intently. She squeezes his hand tightly, unsure whether it will be a support or the beginning of new difficulties, then quietly asks if he can pass her the paper, expressing hope with a soft smile. Lutz asserts with ardent determination that he has a life's work to do and will make anything she can think of come true, while the girl listens attentively to every word. The girl reassures Lutz, saying that he expressed himself clearly and confidently, and the fair-haired man watches with noticeable surprise and slight tension, struck by the directness of her assessment. She says she dreams of selling paper that isn't made from leather, confident that it will be cheaper to produce and bring in more profit. The man silently leaves the decision up to her, without interfering. The burden asks the girl if her first job was really handling paperwork at the gate, and she replies negatively. Then the tall man asks if she wants to become a merchant, and she calmly confirms that it's her second aspiration, leaving him speechless. A young man confesses that he dreams of becoming a librarian and working among books, while another man laughs, claiming that such work is only available to noblemen, causing obvious annoyance in the listener. The girl explains that their baptism will take place next summer, and they are preparing a paper prototype for the spring to test its suitability. The man agrees and adjusts his scarf around his neck. They rejoice at their success, and the girl clarifies that she managed to get a deferment from Benno at the moment when he was about to abandon them. The man calls this an impressive victory. The three sit at a table with refreshments, and one of the men remarks that the meeting was much more interesting than he expected, thanks to mine, as the image changes to a close-up of food and drink. One of the men asks Otto if the girl is truly a soldier's daughter, and the other confirms it, but admits there's something odd about her. Otto explains her unusual appearance, patched clothes juxtaposed with perfectly clear skin and well-groomed hair. The girl with the shiny hair is praised for her perfect look, raising questions about how she achieved it, but Otto and others believe it will be extremely difficult to get the secret out of her. One notes that there is something disturbing in her self-important manner, claiming that this is the way children from strict families speak, but another clarifies that she comes from an ordinary family of soldiers, and not from impoverished aristocrats. He reflects on the two sisters, noticing that one has shiny hair but no inner radiance, while mine has a rare ability to count and remember, something he has never told anyone about before. A man confidently declares that he would trust her with 70% of all the paperwork at the gate, surprising the woman, while another notes her intimidating potential despite her poor vocabulary, reminding her that she already helped create a curriculum for new recruits. They discuss her unusual talents, finding them both astonishing and abnormal. One remarks that her father knows this, another doubts the leader would even notice her abilities, and the man sighs and admits he doesn't even know how to appreciate it. The fair-haired man asks if the little girl can really succeed, and the dark-haired man confidently replies that her paper was not parchment, and he already supported her last time. The first man doubts they can handle the little lady and asks if the plan includes taking mine as well, but the second man confidently replies that she is capable of changing the market. He then insists on taking both girls, claiming that mine alone can provide a wealth of goods, but the first man sharply objects, reminding them that one of them is his assistant. The dark-haired man emphasizes that Maine is surprisingly weak. In the spring, she couldn't even walk from the house to the gate, so it's physically impossible to put her to work in the shop in such health. The boy recalls that the meeting was cancelled because the girl had been suffering from a fever for 5 days and still could not come, while the three discuss her fragility and doubts about whether she would survive the harsh conditions. Someone asks Benno if he has any ideas about the illness Maine spoke of, but Benno silently takes a sip from his mug at the food table. The girl tells the man that she wants to ask him and Benno about a strange fever that seems to expand and contract inside, devouring them from the inside, but both admit that they have never heard of such a thing. He holds the mug and muses that he thought of devouring it first, but there is no confirmation, and in the end he just doesn't know. The young man asks what devouring is, and the other explains that it is not a disease, but magic that grows too much and leads to death, adding that even among commoners, carriers of magic are sometimes born, although this is rare. He explains that although there is no proof, her small stature and frequent fainting spells are very consistent with devouring, and without magical items the girl will soon die. She excitedly says she can now make Japanese paper, but the boy warns her not to get too excited, lest her fever rise again. The girl happily asserts, if there's paper, then there are books. The girl joyfully shouts hooray, and runs forward with the basket, while the boy grumbles that the idea is not bad, but it's unclear how they'll pull it all together. She asks if they need tools. The girl remembers that she needs to make the tools first and then work on the paper, and the boy calls her, trying to stop her. The boy asks if she's going to give up after such a long journey, but she confidently replies that she doesn't. She knows the technique, she just couldn't do it before due to weakness. The story goes on about the many books she's read on Japanese paper and how she gave up in the past after seeing how hard the work is. She tells Lutz that the paperwork is a huge job, and now he'll have to do most of the heavy lifting. He replies that he offered to help and asks if she can handle it. She nods, remembering his promise to bring her ideas to life. The girl asks about the wood, and the boy explains to Lutz that they need to find a type of wood suitable as raw material for the fibers, and first they will have to think about replacing the tools. They discuss the need for long, strong wood fibers that interlock well as soft young wood that hardens with age. One of them questions how difficult this task is. She explains that paper is made from both bamboo and bamboo grass, although the boy notes that some trees are much easier to grow, and the girl wonders how to figure out which ones grow easier. The girl tells Lutz that she is leaving the choice of wood to him and asks him to find sunset hibiscus root, the plant used to make the glue that holds the fibers together, although she is not sure if it grows nearby. They discuss the need to find a tree or fruit with sticky sap, after which they decide to ask knowledgeable people about the forest. The girl plans to review the process and compile a list of the necessary tools. She explains that making paper requires a knife and a place near a river, as the steamed wood is immediately cooled with water and the bark is removed while still hot. She notes that all this is only possible on the riverbank. First, wood or plants are harvested, and Lutz has a hatchet. Then a steaming chamber and a cauldron are needed to steam the mulberry bark, but all of this must be made by hand. The white bark is then boiled with ash to soften it, and the narrator notes the difficulty of obtaining ash from Mori. After the fibers are dried, the process will be continued in the following paragraphs. The process begins with boiled white bark soaking in the river for over a day, then thoroughly washing and bleaching in the sun. Afterwards, the fibers are beaten until they resemble cotton, and the water is removed by pressing the future sheet with a heavy weight. Next, the fibers are mixed in a warm basin with water and hibiscus paste, and then formed into paper using bamboo mesh, the most labor-intensive part of the process. The pressed sheets are then dried in the sun and glued to a flat board. The girl recalls a TV show where an idol made paper for a group project, and she's sure she remembers all the steps, but she's unsure about the proportions of water, fiber, and paste, as she's only worked with recycled milk cartons before. Then she remembers that the idol had tools and a mentor, and decides that if the idol could do it, she can too. The same wooden houses are shown day and night. The character sighs and decides to take things one step at a time, realizing there is no other way. The girl suggests Lutz make a steamer first, explaining that its dimensions should match the saucepan. She shows a drawing of a square wooden box, while two children nearby watch silently. He says nails are easy to make and they'll probably do the trick, but she doubts they even have any. They quickly realize they don't have the tools to make them and decide to look for them. She goes to Otto and explains that they want to make the necessary tools, but they don't have the tools to make them, so they need paper first. He laughs, but the girl insists the situation is serious. She tells Otto that they need more than just nails and finds his offer too tricky, but he smiles and offers the nails in exchange for the secret to shiny hair. The boy remarks that Benno's reaction makes the shampoo look like a profitable product, and the girl wonders why he wants the simple two-in-one option. A man at a table with a woman discusses a mysterious vessel and says he can't reveal the recipe but is willing to trade. She recalls the story of his love for Karina, Otto's wife. He agrees to make a deal right away, and the girl promises to teach Karina how to use the product to make her hair just as shiny. A man invites a woman over for a visit on his day off. She thanks him, and he's surprised at how easily everything moves forward with just the mention of her name. He then asks if she's feeling well, and the girl replies that she's fine today. One of the girls happily shows off an invitation from Ms. Karina, explaining that she heard from Otto about a simple two-in-one shampoo. The other is surprised and warns her to be careful to avoid making mistakes. It's said that Karina is an important figure in the sewing guild, and her invitation is akin to an official summons. A woman nearby tells the girl that her old apron is no good and she needs a new one. Maine tells Turi she can go too, but Turi objects she doesn't have an invitation. The narrative explains the complex hierarchy surrounding Otto and Maine's father. One girl is praised for her success, while another admits she helped arrange the invitation herself. Otto is asked if he lives on the north side despite his service, and he explains that he and Karina have a room above her parents' house because her brother wanted his sister close by. A girl is struck by the difference in clothing in buildings within the same city, and the boy carrying her in his arms notes the same contrast. She is surprised to learn that the third floor belongs to the shop, and he explains, the first is the store, the second is the owner's home, and the third is above them. Pit turns out to be a map, a modest house near the southern gate opposite a huge 5-story building. A man outside reflects on his gap in status and his unexpected marriage to the owner of such a large house. The man returns home holding Mine in his arms, and a woman greets them warmly. Another woman introduces herself as Karina, Otto's wife. Otto is surprised their marriage was even allowed, and the girl in his arms asks him to repeat it. Meanwhile, Maine politely greets Karina, and the other woman privately dismisses Otto as superficial. For the first time, she truly looks at the decorated house, admiring its beauty, and joyfully thanks the owner for coming and making her hair so elegant, noting her talent in fashion and decoration. The woman gently touches the girl's hair, admiring its condition and good manners, and the girl herself wonders if her own hair could become as beautiful. The girl suggests they start making something beautiful, and the woman tells Otto to bring water and a towel to dry his hair and then wait in the other room. He protests, reminding her that he's her husband, but they send him away anyway. The dark-haired girl asks Otto not to be boring and not watch the woman's grooming process. Then she begins washing the blonde's hair, who admits the sensation is surprisingly pleasant and something she hadn't noticed before. The girl reminds him that it would be impolite to show this to Otto, but the woman explains that she was only afraid of causing him inconvenience and asks if it is really possible to accept this favor so easily. Mine replies that she gets nails for it, so it's all fair. Her friend wonders if she's underestimating her worth, but Mine assures her it's all fine, and she softly calls her name. She asks San if he will resolve one question, and after he agrees, she inquires about what Otto is like at the gate, admitting that she has been thinking about this ever since he left the merchant's trade because of her. He reassures her, telling her there's no need to worry, Otto is a true merchant at the gate. He laughs, adding that he literally comes alive when he bargains with the suppliers arriving in town. The woman asks Mine if Otto resembles a merchant, and, upon receiving confirmation, visibly relaxes. At that moment, the man calls out to Karina as she goes out to change after washing. The girl asks the man to stay and look after Mine, which surprises him, and the little girl herself speaks enthusiastically about Karina's beauty and her shining creamy hair, causing the man to quickly catch up with his wife. Before reaching the door, he asks if he'll have to change in front of Mine, and jokingly suggests the girl urgently find something important to do. She replies that she'll think about it, if she gets all the nails. Returning home with a heavy bag, she notices that she has received many more nails than she expected and considers this a stroke of luck. The girl is struggling to carry a heavy basket of nails, feeling tired and afraid that she will not make it home, while the man nearby watches her with obvious concern. Lutz calls out to Maine, surprised that she is alone, and she calmly replies that she was just resting after moving nails from Otto's house, showing him her trophy. She thanks Lutz and hands him the item, then asks why he didn't ask someone to carry it for him. He says he'll carry it himself and asks her to give it to him right there. The girl explains that she traded the 2-in-1 shampoo for Otto's help and admits that the supply is running low, so a new batch needs to be brewed soon. The boy offers to help with the next batch. She points out that Lutz needs to learn to do things on his own, but he sheepishly says he doesn't really need it. She reminds him of how Aunt Carla scolded him last time. She adds that even when distributing goods, secrets must not be revealed, useful training for a future merchant. He worries about his hair and remembers how persistent she was. The boy says he wants to practice on something simpler, and the woman reasons that if people can make something themselves, they won't come back for the product again, so the recipe should remain simple but hidden. She asks Lutz what he's been doing, and he explains that he's been interviewing people who might know something about the necessary wood and resin. Then another boy reports that they were advised to use a sticky option, the juice of the ideal fruit or the secretion of the slarmo beetle, with the former clearly preferable to the latter. The boy says they can now try making a steamer and asks if she knows what size it should be, reminding her that she needs to fit it around the boiler and check with her aunt to see if she approves of its use. The girl and the other boy reply that there was no approval, and they can't make the boiler itself. He suggests making something that is actually possible first, and she wonders if she should start with the bamboo mesh first. The next day, the girl explains that the size of the bamboo mesh is fixed and suggests trying out a format roughly the size of a postcard, after which she asks the boy to carefully make the top and bottom bars. They discuss cutting a log into planks for a frame, and the girl admits that the job is much more difficult than it seemed, while the boy clarifies whether she really needs perfectly straight wood. She explains that a small board can be made from the thickened part of a branch, demonstrating an example, and he looks at her, amazed at how easily she conveys the idea. Taking a breath, he asks what to do next with the prepared logs, and she perks up, and he assumes she wants him to plane them into thin planks. But the girl quickly replies no, and gets to work herself. She explains that she has prepared a pencil of soot in advance for just such occasions, and then hands it to the boy, who asks to see the hatchet, and she remarks that they were just about to use it. One of them explains that you need to cut strictly along the marked lines, and then the cut will be even. The other listens and nods, carefully watching the markings in the wood. Lutz shows her the cutout piece, and the girl confirms that the shape is correct. She then mentions that some of the tools will have to be borrowed from her father or brothers. Lutz reacts with obvious enthusiasm. Meanwhile, after deciding to become a merchant's apprentice, the boy faces harsh condemnation from his family, who insist that merchants are cold, only think about money, and that he has given up his dream of traveling in vain. She thinks there's practically nothing she can do to help him directly right now, and at that moment the man asks if she has a minute, referring to Maine and Lutz. Then a voice suggests they start preparing the bamboo strips tomorrow, since the mold is already ready. Lutz shows them an invitation addressed to both of them, and the girl and boy immediately recognize it as a summons from Benno. She confirms that the letter is indeed intended for both her and Lutz.